It's midway through the graveyard shift at a 24-hour grocery store on the northern end of Colorado Springs.
Hey, Kendall, how are you?
At that time of the morning, what you were going to have is primarily people stocking shelves. There just aren't that many customers that are going to be there at 2 in the morning.
Is that the last of those?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
And like any store that's open for business all night, the registers are full of cash.
Around 2 a.m., a clerk by the name of Chad Sparling was inside the store working.
You gonna be able to get all these done tonight?
Yeah, I've just got these two.
Okay.
When he heard some loud voices.
You better open that register right now. Give me your keys, man. Hurry up.
When an individual acts that way,
What the is taking so long? Give me the money.
you don't know how upset, crazy, manic he is at the time. He's in there for a reason. He's there to rob. This is a dangerous individual.
Get the money and let's go. Come on. You want to die tonight? Crawl. I said crawl.
Instead of calling the police, he reacted by going to try to take the gun away from this individual.
Early the next morning, Lt.Joe Kenda is trying to get a head start on a mountain of tedious paperwork.
At that particular time, I was the commander of the Major Crimes Unit, which involved homicide, sexual assault, fugitives, and gangs.
Kenda,
Yeah, boss.
got a job for you. Armed robbery at a grocery store over on Nevada.
Robbery?
Yeah, patrol says suspect fired multiple shots.
Armed robbery doesn't normally fall under Kenda's detail.
We had armed robbery detectives in the headquarters building, but this case had a different dynamic to it. We had an active shooter in these places. The management was extremely concerned that this guy was exceptionally dangerous.
Each time the suspect gets more violent. That's why I want you handling this.
All right, I'm on it.
We were seen as the catch-all. If there was some major event going on, they wanted full focus on that particular offense, then I would be summoned to take over the case.
The reason major crimes got brought into this case was because it was so clearly about to get worse. This guy was growing more and more dangerous. It was really only a matter of time until he shot or killed somebody.
The spate of violence has the entire city in a panic.
It became something that was incredibly frightening. Everybody thought that this was really, really horrible. And the press, of course, continued that process by talking about it constantly.
Press is gonna have a field day with this.
The headlines of gun-wielding maniac on the loose gets people pretty excited because you begin to believe that you, along with everybody else, is at risk from this individual. And in some ways, it's absolutely true.
Kenda begins his investigation by heading to the masked gunman's most recent target.
Hey, LT,
Hey, Drew. So where'd the shooting take place?
over here, I'll show you.
Chad Sparling was lucky he didn't get himself killed, but it further demonstrated this guy's willingness to use that gun. In a crime scene like a grocery store, first of all, the place is quite large. It's not confined like an apartment or a house or a motel room. So you have to be very cautious in looking at everything, but what you'd find is a bunch of display racks that get knocked over in the course of the struggle with him.
Despite the sprawling nature of the crime scene, the gunman left only one single piece of evidence.
Just found one shell casing.
It's got 380.
There was one bullet casing to a .38 automatic that had obviously been intended for Chad, but landed nearby. That did help because they at least knew what they were dealing with now.
Everybody on the
been interviewing witnesses. Do you want to speak with any of them?
What are they saying?
Not a lot of information. They're still pretty shook up.
Where are they?
Over here.
We re-interview employees and a few customers as well. This is hours after the event, and they are still so frightened they can barely speak.
No witness is more petrified than Scott Best.
Can you tell me what happened?
A man came in, he held a gun to my head. I thought he was gonna kill me.
To maintain that peak of emotion for that long is very rare. People get upset, of course they do, but then they start to calm down. After an hour or so, they have a cup of coffee, they relax. This isn't happening with these people. He has put the fear of God in them.
Can you tell me anything about this guy?
The fact he has a ski mask is no big shock. You can't really see anything of the person's face. It covers their hair. So he is concealed as to his race, as to his age, as to anything about him except, of course, his physical size.
Is he taller or shorter than you?
He was shorter than me. He was definitely shorter.
People have great difficulty sometimes estimating height, estimating body weight. So one good way to approach a witness, you ask them, was this person bigger than you, the same as you, or smaller than you?
Yeah, from what everyone's saying, they got our shooter on the shorter side, about 5'4" to 5'6".
Yeah, that's been pretty consistent. Do you want to speak with Chad Sparling? He's the employee who rushed him and got shot at.
Yeah, where is he?
Right over here.
Chad? I'm Lieutenant Kenda. So I heard you made a run at this guy?
I just decided that I wasn't going to let him get away with it. He was scaring everybody, and I thought that I could take him out.
No, that wasn't a good idea.
Yeah, I know.
His actions could be heroic, could also be very stupid, and could lead him to being seriously injured. We advocate in law enforcement that you become the best witness you can, as opposed to taking defensive action.
You got to understand, it was crazy, man. He was making all kinds of threats, waving his gun around.
Steve, crawl! You keep looking at me, I'll shoot you!
He's telling people to crawl. He's calling them every name you can think of. He's screaming, gesturing with his gun. He is absolutely out of control. And he wants to scare people, and it's working. It's not just robbery, it's supremacy. He's on a mad power trip, which makes him really, really lethal. We're going to start finding dead people in these stores. We need to turn him, and we need to turn him right now. We're looking for someone who's committed a string of robberies. He's incredibly violent. He is on a power trip, and he's exceedingly dangerous. This case was given to me because management wanted resolution of this at once. Find this crazy son of a bitch before he kills people.
All right, I need to get everybody in here. Major crimes, robbery, everyone.
Yes, sir.
At the station, Lieutenant Kenda gathers his team and briefs them on the situation.
All right, listen up. We don't have a lot to go on.
Their first challenge is to discern the robber's pattern.
Now, the problem is, Colorado Springs is a big city. There are a lot of grocery stores. Armed robbers tend to rob where they live. This guy is all over town, and he has no identifiable pattern.
He wears a ski mask, and he covers up so much that even the witnesses can't tell what race he is.
Given the fact he's concealing his identity, he probably has a history for armed robbery. I want this group of people to identify any person with a history of armed robbery who is currently out and about.
Lieutenant, we brought in some of the recent parolees if you want to have the witnesses look at them.
Great, make sure you get some of the witnesses in here as soon as possible.
Yes, sir.
You try any person who has been recently paroled, recently released from prison, who has a history of armed robbery or violence-related crimes. We've rounded up all these people, one suspect at a time.
Bring him in.
We do physical lineups with our victim.
Even though the robber's face was hidden by a ski mask, Kenda is hoping witnesses may be able to identify him by his voice.
Number one, step forward and state loudly, open the register and give me the cash.
We ask them to say what victims heard the perpetrator say. Say it in a loud voice to see if their voice is recognized, since they can't tell us what they look like.
Open the register and give me the cash. Let's try that again with a little more feeling. Open the register and give me the cash. No, that's not him. Number two, same thing.
We're getting nowhere with it. And that's not him, that's not him, not him, not him.
Nope.
So it's the typical frustration of criminal investigation in general. You have all these potential guys, all of whom have a history of doing this behavior, and yet we're not getting to the guy that we want.
Open the register and give me the cash.
No, it's not that guy.
No.
It's not any of them.
Are you sure about that?
Yes.
All right, thank you. You can take him out. All right, thanks for coming in.
Disappointed, Kenda heads back to his office to regroup.
Let's get an address on him.
I get back to the office, everybody's all excited.
Lieutenant, we got something.
What do you got?
They've identified a guy. Great. Who's this guy?
His name is David Stern. He's been recently paroled. He's been doing robberies in other states and here. And you're gonna love this part. He specializes in robbing grocery stores.
Really?
Oh boy. That could be exactly who we're looking for, and he's out of jail, so he is footloose and fancy-free out here in the city. Now the focus is him. Find David Stern.
We're trying to find an address for him right now.
All right, good work.
It looked promising. Just released from prison, armed robbery. He appeared to be the guy.
But a little more digging by Kenda's detectives calls their new lead into question.
Hey, I found where our suspect David Stern's been residing.
Great, where's he at?
He's in jail.
He's in custody. He could not physically have been able to commit these offenses. He was identified and arrested again before the first grocery store robbery happened. He's not our guy. He can't be our guy. He is a similar guy, but he's not the guy.
Okay, so we know he's not been involved. Now what?
Here we are. My best lead just went up in smoke. Despite all the wheel spinning, despite all of the effort, we're no better off than we were the moment they said to me, Kenda, take this case.
Kenda decides his best chance to jumpstart the case is to reach out to street-level informants.
The street knows what's happening. They always do. Your best informants are criminals themselves. They pay attention to what's happening. They know things nobody knows because people talk to them. So myself and another detective were riding around the west side of Colorado Springs looking for an informant of ours.
But before Kenda can make contact,
Attention all units.
his day takes an abrupt U-turn.
We have reports of shots fired at 2631 Newcrest Avenue.
Dispatch puts out a call for uniformed officers to respond to report of shots fired with screaming at an address on the near west side.
Let's go. 533 responding.
Kenda knows that if this is the gunman he's been searching for, bringing him to justice means putting his own life at risk.
Let's be ready when we get there. This could get ugly.
Hours later, on the other side of town, Kenda's wife, Kathy, is preparing dinner.
Joe, is that you?
Kathy worked part-time as a nurse then, and I thought she was working that day, but she wasn't.
Joe?
And I walk in the front door, and she's got her back to me.
Kathy? Kathy?
And I said, it's not my blood. I'm just here to change clothes.
Well, what happened?
Kenda explains that while he and a fellow officer were searching for an informant who might help them capture a serial armed robber,
Attention all units.
they received an emergency call from dispatch.
533 responding. Paul and I were out. We got a call of shots fired. We were in the neighborhood. We just happened to be the first to respond. Police, open up!
We kicked the door. We go into this place. The noise is coming out of the kitchen. We go to the kitchen. Here is a man on his knees in literally a puddle of blood the size of the kitchen floor, trying to find a gun. He has a gaping, traumatic gunshot wound to the face. He has no eyes. He has no nose. It's apparent to me that he's tried to kill himself and he flinched.
Kenda realizes this is not the armed robber he's been looking for, but it's still his duty to take control of this horrifying scene.
He shot himself. Let's go for his gun.
He's trying to find that gun to finish the job. So we tackle him. We're trying to control him and handcuff him.
Call paramedic.
Medical gets there, they wrap his head, and they head for an ER. We recovered the gun, and we look at each other, and we're soaked in blood head to foot, both of us. Aren't we a handsome couple? We've got to do something about this, and we're both in the same car. So I dropped him off at his car, and I headed for my house.
And that's what happened. I'm sorry I scared you. I just need to come home and change suits. I gotta go change and get back to work.
She looks at me and said, you know, it's really interesting being married to you. I suppose it is. The police world is the police world. When you're on the street, even though you are focused on finding Mr. Crazy Armed Robber, you're still a policeman. Things still get in the way.
Kenda may have changed suits, but the pressure of capturing this armed robber remains high. So he returns to the station and plots his next course of action.
I was getting really nervous and angry, thinking, you know, this guy's going to kill people. I know it. I can feel it. And what are you doing about it? What are you doing? You become very self-critical. What mistake did I make? What did I overlook?
Police still have no idea who's behind these robberies, and the public is asking what is taking them so long to make an arrest.
There is a level of frenzy in this case that is rare. The press beats the drumbeat of fear. They're all blaming us for this because we're not doing anything about this. Business dropped off. People were relying on what they had in their cupboards. They were afraid to go shopping. They had employees refusing to come to work. And the press, of course, continued talking about it constantly.
They're starting to stir the pot in the community about these robberies. They're establishing kind of a hysteria. So it becomes very difficult because of the press and the panic that it seems to cause in the community.
But the masked maniac is about to turn the pressure up another notch.
Miss Kenda, you've got to be kidding me.
The call comes in, here we go again. He's done another store, this time on Rock Rim Boulevard, the extreme northwest of the city, nowhere near where we hit the last time. It's only been 48 hours since we took this case over, but I feel responsible for it because in the prior 48 hours, I haven't done anything about arresting him. It made me angry. There is no greater frustration than to have the kind of experience and training that I have, along with many of my fellow officers. And despite our Herculean effort on our part, we're unable to stop it.
Was anybody hurt?
He didn't shoot anybody this time. That's a good thing.
Bye.
but he's still doing all the bull that he's done up to now. He's still doing it.
At the crime scene, a handful of traumatized witnesses tell a familiar tale about a crazed gunman in a black ski mask.
So can you tell me what happened?
It was scary as hell. He told us to throw the money in the bag or he'd kill all of us.
It's clearly the same guy. 5'4" to 5'6", ski mask, gloves. He's yelling at them, telling them to beg for their lives.
I'll shoot all you!
It's our guy. There's no question it's our guy.
Can anybody describe him?
All black, just covered in black.
Well, I appreciate the help. We're all set.
These witnesses, they can't tell us anything that's of any real value. He didn't touch anything in the place. There's no evidence to gather. He came, he saw, he robbed, he left. So once again, he's successful. You know what that means. He's not stopping. He's already planning the next one.
Hey, Chief.
We got a problem here.
No kidding.
I get back to the office. Deputy Chief is waiting. So what about this one? Chief, I'm sorry to tell you, there's nothing about this one. There's just nothing there, man.
If we don't change our tact, someone's gonna get killed.
Believe me, I know. I mean, we're doing all that we can.
All we can's not good enough. Now find this guy.
The pressure is ratcheting. We have a full-blown mystery in our hands, and you're in the business of unraveling mysteries. So, my boy, you need to get to unraveling. And that's what we're certainly trying to do with little or no success thus far.
With his back up against the wall, Kenda decides it's time to try a strategy of last resort.
Hey, Carol, it's Joe. Yeah, I need to make some calls to the media outlets. We're gonna have a press conference.
We normally did not do press conferences, but this was different. So it became extremely important, in my view, to tell the public what we were doing.
Yes, I just wanted to let the public know we're using all the resources that we have to work on this case. Every one of my officers is making this their #1 priority. We will catch this guy soon, and we will bring him to justice. Thank you.
I made the case that we are doing our damnedest to resolve this. That came across loud and clear. So I think in many ways it helped to diffuse some of the anxiety and some of the overwhelming fear. People felt better. They were still afraid, but not as fearful as they were.
With the press conference concluded, Kenda returns to the streets in an effort to turn up a lead.
I was out checking surveillance teams. It's 3 o'clock in the morning.
Attention all units.
Radio call comes out.
Report of shots fired at King Super Grocery Store on West Unitah Street. At least one person is down with shots to the back.
Oh my God. Our little maniac has shot someone in the back. My heart dropped through my seat in my car. My greatest fear has just been realized. Shot in the back, no indication of condition. You hope to God he's not dead. You turn the wheel in that car, you put your foot to the floor, and you head for West Uinta. And all those thoughts are running through your head. Now what? Now what? So here we are doing all this work. We have a fearful crime happening involving a very dangerous person. The public is terrified. The police department's put every resource at my disposal to find him. Our greatest fear is that he's going to continue and progress and hurt and kill people. And now I get the call that he shot someone in the back in one of these stores.
Lieutenant, has she been identified?
We've got all kinds of activities happening at this crime scene when I arrive. We have press there in large numbers. You have employees who are crying and terrified in the parking lot. You have tactical enforcement people there in full gear, ready to do whatever it is they have to do.
Miss, can you tell me what happened?
He just came out of nowhere. He started shouting at us and telling us to lie on the floor. He's going to shoot us.
Everybody ground right now! Right now! Get on the ground! I'll shoot all of y'all right now! Crawl! Crawl!
Then what happened?
Well, we all ran. It was total chaos. We didn't know what else to do.
What the are y'all doing? Get over here right now!
Paul Pfister was one of the employees held at gunpoint by the armed robber.
What went through my mind was that I'm not going to stand here and get shot. I decided to take off and run through the aisle. I felt a smack on my backside, and the adrenaline was flowing, so I just kept running. I was scared out of my mind. I was really terrified. I had gotten out of the end of the aisle and gotten upstairs where the offices were.
What happened to you?
I got shot!
Oh my God! Get in here!
I asked them to watch me.
Joe, let me pass out.
We'll let you. We got you. We got you.
So I did not go into shock. Slap me, hit me, whatever. Just do not let me fall asleep.
We've called the police. The police are on the way.
While Paul escaped from the robber, other employees met a different fate.
When he opens fire, one of the employees named Anthony Trujillo stands still.
Get up! Get up and open the register right now! I'm not a cashier, I don't know how. You better find somebody to open that register, you will die!
Tony, unfortunately, does not have keys to the cash register. He can't open it up. He doesn't have the clearance to do it.
The robber forces Tony to plead for a cashier to come help him.
Hurry up!
Hey, can I please get somebody up here to open the register?
Nerves are really high. People are frazzled. They don't know what to do.
Now what?
I can't do anything else.
What the?
That's all I can do!
The cops are coming, give me your wallet!
He heard sirens. He knows he's close to going down for this.
Hurry up! $10? Oh!
This is all the guy had in his pocket. It's a lot of trouble to go to wind up with $10, but it's not just about the money with him. It's about being in charge. It's about being the man everybody's afraid of. The money's, sure, he needs the money, but he needs the power more.
Stay down there, stay! Stay down, stay down! Keep your hands out!
Within minutes, the tactical team arrives.
They think the guy might still be in the business.
Everyone okay?
So they secure those people.
Stand up for me, please, and we're gonna walk towards the door.
They evacuate the store, they get the employees out. They get the wounded man to the hospital.
They searched this place thoroughly, assuming that if he did hear them coming, he may have gone somewhere in the storage areas. Back behind the grocery pallets that are in the rear of the store. They do not find him. He's not in there.
Hey, Lieutenant.
How you doing? Did you find any evidence?
Not much, just one shell casing.
380?
Yes, sir.
It's the same brand, the same head stamp as we found in the other scene.
That same markings as before. It's definitely our guy.
It's not a copycat. It's not somebody trying to act like him. It's him.
Where's the employee that got robbed? I want to talk to him.
He's out there with the rest of the employees.
Tony, the clerk that was manhandled by our suspect, has a very good chance of becoming our best witness. He's in close contact with the suspect. He has the longest contact with this individual during the course of the robbery.
Tony, you the guy that got robbed?
Yes.
Was this guy taller or shorter than you?
A little shorter, maybe 5'5", black guy.
What'd you say?
No, he was black, African American.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm positive. I saw his skin.
How'd you see his skin?
When he grabbed me, his glove slipped down a little, and I just saw he was black on his arm.
We had no idea his race before now. We're getting closer. We know the gun, we know the caliber, we know the manufacturer, now we know he's African American. Inch by inch, we're learning. We don't know enough, but we're learning. Learning is good for us, bad for him.
Kenda has his men search the perimeter of the store for any additional evidence the gunman may have dumped in his hurry to escape police.
He knows the police are close. What do people do when they think the police are close? They discard evidence that might link them to the offense. They start getting rid of things they don't want to be found with if the police arrive before they can physically get out of the area.
So they're looking for anything that could possibly be connected to this robber, to the stuff he wore, to the gun he shot, anything at all.
Time is of the essence in a circumstance like this, and we are at the moment the only hope the community has to put a stop to this. We're the only hope.
I know we're all tired, but we got to keep looking.
It's 3:30 in the morning at this point. But there are a substantial number of policemen in uniform and in plain clothes who are going to search this area physically with flashlights. Let's see what we can find.
Lieutenant, over here.
About an hour in to the search, one team yells jackpot.
What have you got?
Looks like our guy dumped a few things. Got a gun and a ski mask.
They're underneath the car that's parked on the street near the scene.
Fantastic.
I am now elated. After all this vague information, we have for the first time meaningful physical evidence. We are on a roll. It feels really good when that happens. It feels really good.
.380 caliber pistol. That matches our bullet casings.
This is the gun used by the suspect that we've been looking for days.
Nice.
What is it?
The serial number hasn't been removed. It's called ATF.
ATF can trace a weapon from the day of manufacture into the hands of the last lawful owner.
Shortly after returning to the station, Kenda gets a call back from the ATF.
Okay, I've got you on speakerphone. What do you got for us?
The gun belongs to an African-American named Brian Andrews of Colorado Springs.
Brian Andrews purchased this weapon from a pawn shop in Colorado Springs some time ago, and that his name is on the firearms sales transaction record.
Okay, thank you. You want to run him through the system, see what we've got on him?
Will do.
I'm assuming that Brian Andrews is my guy. I don't know that he is, but he is the registered owner of the firearm used. We pull a record on Brian Andrews.
Brian Andrews has several charges against him.
However, no armed robberies.
Okay, well, maybe he's trying something new.
Well, the interesting thing is he just reported his gun stolen.
Really?
Well, my, Mr. Andrews, how convenient. The gun used in the commission of an attempted murder is suddenly been stolen from you, hours after this weapon was used in the commission of a crime. Brian is in this up to his neck. I know it. We're looking for an armed robber.
I'll shoot all of y'all right now!
Carrying a handgun and engaging in incredibly violent and threatening behavior.
Hurry up!
He's African-American male in his 20s. Witnesses put him at 5'4" to 5'6", very light build, 130, 140 pounds.
Kenda and his team have also recovered a gun found at the scene of the most recent robbery and have traced it back to a convicted felon named Brian Andrews.
What's unique is Brian Andrews tried to report his weapon stolen after the robbery had occurred, after we'd recovered it. So Brian Andrews was contacted. He was brought in for the purpose of an interview.
Mr. Andrews, I'm Lieutenant Kenda. Got a few questions for you.
When I first meet Brian Andrews, he's 25 years old. He is African-American. That part matches. But this guy's built like he could play linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys. No one would describe him as 5'4" to 5'6" and slightly built. He's not the guy.
Even if Andrews isn't the gunman, Kenda senses he might be involved.
What can you tell me about a robbery of a grocery store?
Robbery? Are you serious? Oh my God, man.
Listen, I don't know anything about stealing money from any of these grocery stores. You all can just let me go now.
He is arrogant. He is evasive. He's all the things he should be because he's lying.
How is it we found your gun underneath a car near one of those crime scenes?
Somebody stole it from me. I was at some party somewhere. I set it down for like a minute. Somebody walked off with it.
Well, you know, Brian, it's the trouble with people. You just can't trust them, can you? People take things that don't belong to them. It's a shame, isn't it?
Brian, I got a form here that you filled out when you purchased that gun that you lied on. That's a big no-no.
On the firearm application, Brian denied having ever been charged with a crime, when in fact he had been arrested and convicted of a felony.
If you answer incorrectly, the assumption is you are lying intentionally, and the prosecution is an automatic 5 years in federal penitentiary and a $10,000 fine for falsifying a firearms transaction record when purchasing a gun.
I got an ATF agent right out in the hallway right now. I can bring him in, he can take over if you'd like.
He's going to take you to a federal lockup in Denver, and you're going to do a nickel in the joint. That piece of paper is going to put your ass away.
So what do you think, Brian? Is your memory clearing up a little bit?
All right, man, I'll tell you. This is a friend of mine, Michael Brown. He's the guy you want.
Brian lays it out, tells us everything about Michael, and he comes out with it because he knows if he's cooperative, they may be helpful to him. State time is way better than federal time.
He was sitting in stores, and I was driving him. We've been sharing the money he got.
So he admits that he is, in fact, the driver. It was Michael Brown's idea. He wanted to commit these robberies, and Brian goes along with it. So they're all over town because they have a car.
Where's this Michael living?
I think he's with one of our friends on Harmony Drive.
Is he there now?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Thank you for your cooperation.
By the time we turn this information, it's late at night, which is kind of perfect for us, because he's probably sleeping, and his driver is in custody. So we put together a warrant for the address that Brian provides for one Michael Brown on a series of crimes.
At approximately 2 a.m., Kenda and his team descend on Michael Brown's apartment.
We have a warrant, but it's referred to as a high-risk warrant service. The principle in high-risk warrant service is overwhelming force. You bring enough people with you that strikes fear in people's hearts. You want to overcome anybody even considering going for a weapon.
Police! Police department, down, down, down!
We find him laying on the floor, this little dude laying there in a sleeping bag.
Get the hell up.
We crank a gun up his nose and say, well, Mr. Badass.
Go ahead and cuff him.
You're under arrest.
Hands on your back.
He's almost ready to piss his pants. He's almost ready to start crying.
Enjoy the scenery on your ride to the station. You aren't going to be seeing much of anything for a long time.
We charge him creatively, as we say. You charge every criminal offense he's committed individually and separately. It adds up to 62 felony counts.
It is my great pleasure to announce that we have made an arrest in the recent robberies of local grocery stores.
Morning after the arrest, we held a press conference. That was a fun one to do.
I want you to know that we intend to prosecute the suspect to the fullest extent of the law.
You could feel the pressure go out of the community.
Thank you, sir.
People were happy. They were no longer afraid. They were going to go shopping even if they didn't need to, just because they could. So it was a great feeling.
Lieutenant Kenda came to the hospital and saw me in intensive care and told me we caught him. That was great news. I tell you, that was great news.
There was a lot of relief when this party was taken into custody. The grocery stores and their management employees were very pleased. They were able to then go back to normal business and not have this great fear hanging over them.
The community is also spared a lengthy trial when Michael Brown agrees to plead guilty.
The judge sentenced him to 99 years of consecutive offenses, which means he'll never get out of jail.
For Kenda, it's a satisfactory ending to a case he will always remember.
It's the only time in my career I was ever able to prevent a death as opposed to dealing with the aftermath of one. We stopped something that was going to get totally out of control.
The first thing the dispatcher heard wasn't screaming, it was breathing, tight and shallow, like someone running with a hand over their own mouth, like fear trying to stay quiet, and then a sound that didn't belong in any call at all, a dull, rhythmic thump, as if something heavy was being dragged across concrete, again and again, closer, closer, and a voice, male, low, irritated, muttering just out of range of the microphone, before the line snapped into a dead, clean silence that felt too deliberate to be an accident, and when the operator called back, the phone rang into nothing, and somewhere in Texas, in the heat that makes the night feel alive, a family's life cracked open and never quite closed again. It was 2001, a year still innocent enough to believe every missing person would come home, a year of neon gas station signs and payphones and flipped lids on cell phones, a year when the internet was a rumor in small towns and a rumor wasn't enough to save you, and it started, like so many nightmares start, not in a dark alley, not in some cinematic storm, but under fluorescent lights where the floor is always sticky and the coffee is always burnt and the cameras always seem to be looking slightly away from the thing that matters most. They said her name out loud so often it began to sound like a prayer and a warning at the same time. Maddie, Rowe, 17, on a roll, weekend shift at the diner off Route 87, the kind of girl who smiled with her whole face, the kind who carried pepper spray on her keychain because her mother insisted, the kind who never missed curfew because she didn't want to give her father one more reason to worry. The town was the type of place where everyone knew who bought groceries on which day, where the sheriff's deputy still waved from the cruiser like it was a friendly patrol instead of a rolling gun, where Friday nights meant football and Sunday mornings meant church and the same handful of stories told again and again until they felt permanent. Maddie wanted out, not because she hated it, but because she could feel the walls closing in, the way small towns can love you like a tight fist, and in the summer of 2001 she was saving for community college, for a used car with a working air conditioner, for a life that belonged to her. She never got to spend it. The official timeline looks neat on paper. It's always neat on paper. 9:12 p.m., Maddie clocks out at the diner. 9:27 p.m., she stops at the Brazzers Mart, the lone gas station perched where the highway bends and the field begins, a place that sells cigarettes, windshield fluid, bait, and lottery tickets that almost never pay. 9:31 p.m., the clerk later says she bought a bottle of water and a pack of gum. 9:33 p.m., she steps outside. 9:34 p.m., a truck rolls in. 9:35 p.m., she's gone. 1 minute you're an ordinary girl with a ponytail and a summer tan, the next you're a photo on a missing poster taped to every door in town, your face bleaching in the sun while strangers squint and pretend they recognize you. But the truth, the real truth, is not neat. The truth is a smear, a blur, a stutter of events that investigators spent years trying to slow down and replay. There was the security camera, grainy, fixed, half-blinded by the reflection of the lights. There was the audio, barely. In the footage Maddie is a pale figure near the front doors, shifting her weight, looking down at something in her hands. A truck enters frame like a shadow with headlights. It's hard to make out the color, dark, maybe black, maybe blue, hard to tell the model, hard to see the plate. A second figure appears, tall, moving fast, too fast for the frame rate. Maddie's head snaps up. Her shoulders tense. There's a gesture, maybe a hand raised, maybe an arm reaching out. The two figures collide at the edge of the camera's view, like a struggle happening just outside of what the town is allowed to see. Then Maddie's body is pulled, not running, not walking, pulled sideways. The truck's door opens. The camera catches a flash of movement, then the truck reverses, pivots, and disappears into the black ribbon of highway like it was swallowed whole. When the clerk called 911, he kept saying the same phrase, over and over, like if he repeated it enough it would become less real. She was right there. She was right there. He described Maddie's car still at the pump, driver's side door ajar, keys in the ignition like she planned to be gone for 30 seconds and no more. On the pavement near the trash can, there was her water bottle, rolling slowly, wobbling in place, as if it didn't understand why the hand that held it was no longer present. Her pepper spray was on the ground too, the keychain snapped, canister scuffed like it had been kicked. The clerk said he didn't hear a scream, not one, and that detail would haunt the town because it suggested something worse than violence. It suggested control, planning, someone who knew how to take a person without setting off the alarms of the world. The sheriff's office arrived in minutes, lights washing the gas station in blue and red. The deputy who stepped out first was young enough to still believe bad things happen somewhere else. He saw the open car door. He saw the keys. He saw Maddie's photo on the driver's license in her wallet, found later on the passenger seat, because Maddie had taken it out for the clerk to scan for cigarettes she didn't even buy. He smelled gasoline and hot asphalt and that faint scent of a cheap air freshener. He called for backup. He called for the state. He called for anyone who could make sense of what he was looking at. Because in a town like this, a kidnapping isn't a headline, it's an invasion. It's someone stepping over your threshold and proving your locks are pretend. By midnight, the highways out of town were lined with patrol cars. Flashlights combed the ditches. Dogs sniffed the gravel shoulder, noses pressed to the ground, circling like they were reading invisible ink. The first rumor came before the first official statement, because rumors are faster than facts and always will be. Some said Maddie ran away. Some said she had a secret boyfriend. Some said they saw a strange truck weeks earlier, cruising slow past the high school. Mothers pulled their children closer in grocery store aisles. Fathers stared too long at every unfamiliar vehicle. The diner where Maddie worked put her name on the chalkboard in block letters, like a daily special, like it could keep her present, bring Maddie home. And then there was the call. It came in at 10:17 p.m., less than an hour after she vanished, to a different dispatcher in a neighboring county. The caller didn't say their name. They didn't say where they were. They didn't even speak in a full sentence. All they said, barely audible, cracked like a whisper through clenched teeth, was, "Please, please don't," and then the breathing, the thumping, the male voice in the background, and the click. Investigators would later argue about what that call meant. Some believed it was Maddie, somehow reaching a phone in the chaos. Some believed it was a prank. Some believed it was the kidnapper, taunting. But the timestamp is a nail in the wall of the case, 10:17. A moment frozen, proof that whatever happened after the gas station, Maddie was still alive long enough to plead. Long enough to be afraid. The next days were a fever dream. Search parties formed like storm clouds. People who hadn't spoken in years walked shoulder to shoulder through mesquite and brush, calling her name until their throats burned. Helicopters swept the fields with lights so bright they turned the ground white. The sheriff held press conferences on the courthouse steps, sweat shining on his forehead, his voice too steady, insisting they were following leads, insisting they were optimistic, insisting on words that sounded professional even as the town's faith thinned like paper in rain. The FBI arrived with clipboards and calm eyes and a phrase that made everyone's stomach drop: "This is likely an abduction by a stranger." Not the ex-boyfriend. Not the runaway fantasy. Not the easy story. A stranger. The worst kind. The kind you can't predict because you don't know their face. They pulled the security tape and enhanced it until the pixels looked like a mosaic of lies. They traced tire marks, 2 tracks that started hard and then smoothed out, as if the driver accelerated quickly, confident, practiced. They tested the scuffed pepper spray canister for fingerprints and got nothing usable. They canvassed every truck in a 50-mile radius, every dark pickup, every man who owned duct tape, every man who didn't have an alibi tight enough. Tips flooded in. A black truck seen near a river. A blue truck parked at a motel. A dark truck that felt wrong at a stoplight. It was always a truck. It was always dark. It was always too late. And then the witnesses started to appear, not with answers, but with fragments. A woman in a minivan who said she saw a girl at the Brazzers Mart at 9:30, standing too close to a man like she didn't want to be. A trucker who said he passed a dark pickup on the highway doing 80, weaving, as if the driver didn't care who saw. A teenager who swore he heard a scream in the distance that night but didn't tell anyone because he thought it was a coyote or kids messing around. Each statement came with the same ache: if you had spoken sooner, if you had looked twice, if you had trusted the uneasy feeling in your gut, would it have changed anything? The question hung over the town like a low ceiling. The investigators found something else on day 3, something that would split the community into believers and doubters for decades: a single shoe, a white sneaker with a pink stripe, discovered in a drainage culvert 15 miles east, half submerged in muddy water, lace tied, toe scuffed. Maddie's mother identified it immediately. She didn't hesitate. She didn't need to see the other one. She held it to her chest like it was a piece of her daughter's body, and the sound she made was not a sob, not exactly, but a raw, animal break that turned every person in the room into a witness. The sheriff announced it at a press conference and the town heard the subtext loud as a siren: she had been out there. She had been moved. She had been dropped like evidence. They widened the search area. They brought in divers. They dragged the river with hooks that scraped the bottom like fingers trying to find a secret. They found nothing else. No second shoe. No clothing. No blood. No body. Just emptiness, and emptiness is the cruelest kind of proof because it can mean anything. It can mean she's alive somewhere. It can mean she's gone somewhere. It can mean the person who took her was careful, methodical, the kind who cleans up after himself like a homeowner after a storm. At night, the phone in the row house sat on the kitchen counter like a bomb that never exploded. Every ring made Maddie's mother flinch. Every silence felt suspicious. Her father started sleeping in a chair by the front window with a shotgun across his lap, not because he expected Maddie to walk up the driveway, but because he couldn't stand the idea that the world could enter his home without permission again. Her little brother stopped asking when she was coming back and started asking if the bad man was still out there. The town's children learned a new vocabulary: abduction, ransom, suspect, cold case. They learned to look over their shoulders. They learned that safety is not a guarantee, it's a story adults tell to keep kids asleep. The case was already slipping into the shape that ruins lives: too many leads, not enough truth. 1,000 faces in 1,000 trucks. A call that might be her or might be a ghost. A shoe in a culvert like a breadcrumb dropped into darkness. And somewhere, on some road that night, a driver held the wheel steady and the radio low, and in the passenger seat, if you believe the worst, someone tried not to make a sound because the moment you make a sound is the moment you realize no one is coming. The sheriff kept saying, "We will not stop." The FBI kept saying, "We are pursuing every avenue." And the town kept waking up to the same empty bed, the same missing poster, the same question that got sharper with each sunrise: how do you disappear a person in plain sight, under bright lights, with cameras watching, with a community so close-knit it can smell a stranger from a mile away, and still leave nothing behind but a shoe and a phone call that ends like a door slamming in the dark? By the end of the first week, the town had learned the brutal math of a missing girl: every hour is a door closing, every sunrise is another layer of dust on the trail, and every new tip, no matter how hopeful, arrives already decaying. The sheriff's office looked like a war room built out of fluorescent misery: maps taped to walls, pushpins blooming like a rash across counties, paper cups of cold coffee, detectives with shirts stuck to their backs, and Maddie Rowe's face everywhere, smiling in photographs taken before anyone knew what a smile would cost. They enlarged the gas station footage until the pixels became blocks of color, then blocks of doubt, then blocks of rage. They ran still frames through every system they had. They sent it to Austin. They sent it to the feds. They sent it to a lab that promised miracles and delivered only sharper uncertainty. A dark pickup. A tall figure. A fast grab. The camera never caught the license plate. The angle missed the driver's face. The lens, like a coward, looked away at the exact second the town needed it to stare. The clerk, a wiry man in his 30s named Hal Whitmore, sat in an interview room and replayed the moment until his voice sounded scraped raw. He remembered Maddie's hair, pulled back, damp at the edges like she'd been working hard. He remembered she seemed tired but not upset. He remembered the truck idling for a second too long. He remembered the man's boots, work boots, maybe, thick sole, and a flash of something in his hand that he couldn't swear was a weapon, couldn't swear wasn't just the dark trick of shadow. He remembered Maddie turning her head as if someone called her name. That detail made detectives look at each other in silence, because if Maddie turned like that, if she reacted like recognition, then the stranger theory cracked. Or it didn't. Maybe the kidnapper had said her name. Maybe he'd done it softly, confidently, like a friend, like someone who knew exactly how to short-circuit a girl's instincts for one fatal second. They pulled Maddie's phone records. In 2001, it wasn't a glowing tracker in your pocket. It was a blunt object that barely held a signal and died if you looked at it wrong. Still, records told their own story. Calls to her mother. Calls to the diner manager. A few calls to friends. One number appeared twice in the week before she vanished, unlisted, not saved in her contacts, a short call both times. The detectives asked her friends. No one knew it. They asked her ex-boyfriend. He denied it. They tracked it to a prepaid phone sold at a big box store 40 miles away. Prepaid meant disposable. Disposable meant deliberate. They tried to find the purchase record and hit the wall of old systems and missing receipts. The number went dead 2 days after Maddie disappeared. It was like someone lit a match, used it, and snuffed it out before the wind could carry the smoke. Meanwhile, that 1017 call gnawed at everyone like a rat in the walls. The dispatcher who took it remembered the sound of the breathing, the way it made her own throat tighten. She remembered the thump, soft but heavy, and the man's voice, close enough to hear a word she couldn't fully catch, a syllable that might have been, move, or, stop, or, damn. Forensics pulled what they could from the recording. They cleaned it, filtered it, amplified it until the breathing filled the room, until the thump became a heartbeat you couldn't ignore. Some tech swore they heard the hum of a highway, tires on asphalt, maybe. Someone else insisted it sounded like a garage door in the distance, a metal roll and a clank. They argued over ghosts. They chased echoes. And in the row house, Maddie's mother listened to it once, just once, and then couldn't bear to hear it again. She said it was her daughter. She said she'd know her child's fear anywhere. That kind of certainty doesn't come from evidence. It comes from blood. On day 9, a volunteer found something in a strip of scrubland near a service road, half buried under dry grass, a strip of duct tape, folded on itself, with a single long dark hair stuck to the adhesive. It was nothing and it was everything. They bagged it like it could speak. The lab tested it. The hair did not match Maddie. It belonged to someone else, female, unknown, no match in any database. The duct tape held no clean fingerprints. Just smears. Partial ridges. The case gave them a second victim without giving them a second name. The possibility hung there, cold and bright, this wasn't the first time. Or it was. Or it was some unrelated trash. The problem with evidence in the open is that the world touches it before you do. The wind contaminates. The sun cooks. Time vandalizes. The town, desperate for a villain they could stare at, built one out of suspicion. The first to catch fire was a man named Randall Pike, a drifter with a record, petty theft, trespassing, a fist fight behind a bar. He'd been seen at the Brazzers Mart earlier that evening, buying beer, lingering too long in the snack aisle. Someone remembered his eyes. Someone said he looked off. The sheriff's deputies brought him in. The newspapers ran his mugshot like it was a confession. For 48 hours, people believed they could exhale. Then the timeline crushed the theory. Pike had been arrested in the neighboring county at 9:40 p.m. for public intoxication, booked, fingerprinted, photographed. He couldn't be at the gas station at 9:34. The town didn't apologize. It just shifted its hunger to another target, because panic needs a body to attach itself to, and if it can't find the truth, it will settle for a substitute. Next came the truck. A dark pickup matching the blurry outline was pulled over outside of town. The driver, a middle-aged ranch hand, had scratches on his forearm. He said he'd been repairing fence line. He showed receipts. He showed a time-stamped photo of the cattle he'd loaded that night. The scratches were consistent with barbed wire. His truck had mud in the wheel wells, hay in the bed, the smell of animal and sweat. No blood. No hair. No sign of a girl. They let him go. He drove home shaking, and for months after, whenever he went to the grocery store, people watched him like he was still being weighed. Detectives worked through Maddie's life like surgeons, cutting into every friendship, every secret, every argument. They combed her diary and found nothing but ordinary teenage worries, grades, college, money, a fight with her mother about a skirt she wanted to wear. They searched her room and found a brochure for a community college in San Marcos, folded and refolded. Her mother said she used to stand at the window sometimes, staring out at the highway, like she was already half gone. That detail made some people whisper, "Run away," again, because it was the soft, comforting lie, the idea that Maddie chose this, that she was somewhere safe, that she would call when she was ready. The sheriff hated that theory, not because it was impossible, but because it was poison. Runaway meant no urgency. Runaway meant the world shrugging. And every instinct in law enforcement, the evidence, the abandoned car, the snapped pepper spray, screamed the same hard word, taken. They checked every motel and truck stop along the routes out of town. They asked clerks about a girl with a ponytail, a girl looking scared, a girl in the passenger seat of a truck. They posted flyers in bathroom stalls, on bulletin boards, on the doors of laundromats. A waitress in Waco called in and said she served a girl who looked like Maddie, sitting across from a man with a beard, who kept answering for her. The waitress said the girl's hands were shaking, that she didn't eat, that she stared at the table like it was safer than looking up. When police arrived, the booth was empty. The waitress couldn't describe the truck. Only that it was dark. Always dark. The longer it went, the more the case became a mirror for everyone's fears. Parents changed routines. Kids stopped biking alone. Church sermons shifted tone, less about salvation, more about evil. The high school held an assembly, teachers speaking with voices too solemn, telling students to be careful, to watch for strangers, to report anything suspicious. Maddie's best friend, Lacey, stood at the podium and tried to read a statement but broke down halfway through, her words dissolving into sobs that echoed off the gym walls. That sound, teenage grief amplified by a microphone, was the moment the town understood it wasn't a headline anymore. It was a wound that didn't close. Then, just as the search began to dull into routine, a letter arrived. It came to the sheriff's office in a plain envelope, no return address. The paper inside was cheap, torn unevenly at the edge as if ripped from a notepad. The message was printed in block letters, careful, almost childish. It said, "Stop looking or she'll disappear for good." No name. No signature. No ransom demand. No proof of life. Just a threat shaped like a promise. Some deputies believed it was a sick prank. Others believed it was the kidnapper stepping into the light for a second just to remind them he existed. The lab found no usable fingerprints. No DNA. The paper had been handled with gloves or wiped clean. The postage stamp was common. The postmark came from a town 2 hours away. 2 hours meant 100 different roads, 100 different choices. 2 hours meant nothing. But it changed everything anyway, because now the case had a voice, a taunting, controlling voice, and the community leaned in like they were listening to a monster breathe. The sheriff went on television, jaw tight, eyes hard, and said they would not stop. He said threats would not deter them. He said anyone with information should come forward. The reporter asked if he believed Maddie was still alive. The sheriff paused too long. That pause said more than any words could. In the row kitchen, Maddie's mother watched the broadcast with her hands clenched, nails biting into her palms, and when the sheriff hesitated, something in her face went flat. It wasn't resignation. It was steel. She started calling radio stations. She started giving interviews. She started pushing Maddie's picture into every camera lens she could find. She described her daughter's laugh. Her freckles. The small scar on her knee from falling off a bike at 8. She made Maddie real for strangers, because the enemy of a kidnapping is not just police, it's forgetting. As weeks slid into months, the evidence board grew crowded with lines connecting names to places, places to vehicles, vehicles to nowhere. The FBI profilers brought their theories. The kidnapper likely knew the area, comfortable enough to move fast. He likely watched the gas station before. He likely chose Maddie because she was alone. They talked about organized offenders, about control, about fantasy, words that sounded clinical but carried a stench. They suggested searching properties without buildings, barns, wells. The deputies knocked on doors. Ranchers bristled. Some refused. Others allowed searches but watched with angry eyes. Everyone felt accused. Everyone felt afraid. And then, near the first anniversary, another object surfaced, like the case refusing to die quietly. A hunter walking the edge of a dry creek bed found a charm bracelet tangled in weeds, the metal dull, the charms half rusted. It had a small heart, a tiny silver boot, a plastic bead shaped like a star. Maddie's mother saw it and collapsed into a chair as if her legs had been cut. She said Maddie wore it constantly. She said she never took it off, not even to shower. The bracelet was sent to the lab. The bracelet did belong to Maddie. Her DNA was on it, faint but present, a trace of skin cells trapped under the clasp. But there was also another DNA profile, partial, male, unknown. Not enough to identify, not enough to match to anyone in the system. A ghost's fingerprint, but genetic. The charm bracelet became a second marker in the wilderness, a second pin on the map, and when you drew a line between the culvert where the shoe was found and the creek bed where the bracelet surfaced, it pointed toward a stretch of back roads and ranch land where cell service fades and the night feels enormous. Investigators drove it over and over, headlights sweeping fences, scanning for a hidden driveway, a gate left open, a barn with lights at odd hours. They searched abandoned structures. They questioned landowners again. They dug near old sheds. They found nothing. The land swallowed their efforts the way it swallows footprints, quietly, completely, without apology. And that was the terror at the center of it, not just that someone took Maddie Rowe, but that they did it and then folded back into the world like a man stepping out of a storm into a warm house, like they could sit in a pew on Sunday and bow their head and no one would ever know. The town kept living because it had to, school bells, football games, weddings, funerals, but everything was stained. Every dark pickup on the road made hearts jump. Every unfamiliar face in the diner made waitresses watch the hands, the eyes, the posture. The case didn't end. It just sank deeper, embedding itself into the town's bones, turning every ordinary night into a question, and somewhere out there, in that stretch of Texas where the roads unspool into darkness, someone had proof of what happened, proof that could shatter the silence, yet the only thing they offered the world was a shoe, a bracelet, a threat, and the long, aching sound of a call that ended before anyone could say her name out loud. The second year began the way the first ended, with a photograph that wouldn't age, taped to windows that did, staring out at a town that kept moving while the case stayed still, and the stillness was its own kind of violence, a slow suffocation wrapped in routine, because now people had learned how to live with a missing girl the way they learned how to live with drought, by talking about it constantly and never talking about it at all. The sheriff's office stopped holding daily briefings. The volunteers stopped showing up in crowds. The helicopters stopped circling. And in the quiet that followed, the case didn't fade so much as it hardened, like mud baking into clay, each unanswered question becoming sharper, less forgiving, until every investigator who touched it felt the same thing, pressure, the kind that doesn't come from bosses or media but from the simple fact that a person was taken and the world kept turning as if that was acceptable. They built the timeline again, piece by piece, as if repetition could summon a detail everyone missed the first time. Maddie clocks out. Maddie drives. Maddie stops. Maddie vanishes. But now they added layers, looking not just at what happened that night, but at what happened in the weeks before, because kidnappings like this rarely erupt out of pure randomness. They leak into reality through cracks, through patterns so small you don't notice until you're staring at them under a microscope. They pulled old reports from the surrounding counties, creepy encounters, late-night prowlers, suspicious vehicles near schools, women followed in parking lots. A few stood out, not because they matched perfectly, but because they rhymed. A teenage girl in a town 30 miles south had called police months earlier, saying a dark pickup crawled behind her while she walked home, keeping pace until she ducked into a neighbor's yard. A woman at a grocery store had reported a man in a cap lingering by her car, asking directions he didn't need. A college student had found a zip tie tucked under her windshield wiper like a quiet threat. Each report on its own was a pebble. Together, they started to look like a trail. The FBI profilers returned with the same clinical language and a colder tone. They said the offender was likely local or semi-local, comfortable with the geography, the back roads, the places where you can drive 10 minutes and vanish into nothing but brush and fences. They said he was organized, he approached quickly, controlled the victim silently, removed her from the scene in under a minute. They said he may have rehearsed. They said he might have watched the gas station before, learned the blind spots, learned the habits of the clerk. They said he might follow media coverage obsessively, both for thrill and for control. When the sheriff asked about the letter, "Stop looking or she'll disappear for good," the profiler shrugged and said it could be real, it could be a copycat, but either way it was someone who wanted power, someone who understood fear as a lever. Power was what the town felt it had lost. Maddie's mother, Karen Rowe, fought against that loss like it was a physical attacker. She held fundraisers. She organized candlelight vigils. She kept Maddie's room exactly the same, bed made, posters on the wall, a half-used bottle of nail polish on the dresser like her daughter might come back and finish what she started. She learned how to speak to cameras without shaking. She learned which reporters cared and which ones only wanted a hook. She learned to repeat the details like a spell: 17, brown hair, green eyes, last seen at the Brazzers Mart, please call, please don't look away. Her husband, Tom Rowe, didn't speak much anymore. He built things in the garage, shelves, birdhouses, anything that allowed his hands to move while his mind stayed trapped. Neighbors said he'd aged 10 years in 12 months. He didn't correct them. He just kept building, hammer strikes echoing like a countdown. Then, one night in late October, the case jolted again, not with an answer, but with a new kind of dread. A truck driver on a long-haul route stopped at a rest area near the edge of the county, late, after midnight, the kind of hour when the world feels hollow. He walked toward the bathrooms and heard something he couldn't place at first, a faint tapping, regular, not like footsteps, not like wind. He followed the sound to a payphone booth that still stood there like a relic. Inside, hanging from the metal cord, was the receiver, swaying gently as if someone had just let go. The driver picked it up, expecting a dial tone. Instead he heard breathing. Not the steady breathing of a normal call, but a broken pattern, a small inhale, a pause, another inhale, as if someone on the other end was trying not to cry. He said, "Hello?" The breathing stuttered. A voice, female, very soft, whispered something he couldn't fully understand. He heard one word clearly: help. Then, in the background, that same low, irritated male voice, sharp and close, and the line went dead. The truck driver stared at the receiver like it had burned him. He reported it. The sheriff's office treated it like a live wire. They pulled the phone's records. They found that a call had been placed from that payphone to a number in the neighboring county at 12:43 a.m., a number that belonged to a dispatch line. The call had never logged properly because the operator on duty had been handling another emergency, the line busy, the call dropped. It was a near miss captured only by the phone company's data. The rest area was 27 miles from the Brazzers Mart. 27 miles meant access, movement, a corridor. The payphone booth was checked for prints. It had too many. It was checked for DNA. It was smeared with time. The recording didn't exist because no one answered. The only evidence was a man's shaken statement and a single call log that proved the receiver had been lifted by someone. The town heard about it anyway, because secrets don't stay in small places. Karen Rowe found out and demanded to know if it was Maddie. The sheriff told her they couldn't say. The uncertainty was a knife that never dulled. People whispered that Maddie was still alive, kept moving, forced to call when she could. Others whispered that the kidnapper was playing with them, letting them smell hope and then yanking it away like a leash. The truth sat between those possibilities like a locked door. Investigators returned to that rest area with dogs and floodlights. They combed the trash cans. They checked nearby wooded patches. They found cigarette butts, soda cans, a torn fast food bag. One cigarette butt stood out, brand uncommon in the region, filtered in a specific way. They sent it to the lab. The saliva on the filter produced a partial DNA profile, male. It didn't match anyone in the database. Another ghost, another almost, another thread that led into darkness. In the months that followed, the case became a magnet for the wrong kind of attention. True crime forums began trading theories. Amateur sleuths drove into town and took photos of the gas station like it was a tourist stop. People called the sheriff to accuse neighbors, to accuse ex-boyfriends, to accuse strangers seen once at a diner. The police had to separate noise from signal, and the noise was endless. Yet sometimes the noise hides a note, and that's what kept them listening even when their eyes looked exhausted. A retired deputy named Frank Malloy asked to see the files. He'd worked patrol for 30 years, the kind of man who read people by the way they held their shoulders. He sat in the evidence room and watched the gas station footage again. He didn't focus on Maddie. He focused on the truck, on the way it entered, the way it reversed, the way it pivoted. That driver knows that lot, he said. He's been there. He asked about other incidents at the Brazzers Mart, shoplifting, disturbances, anything. They pulled calls for service. There had been one a month before Maddie vanished, a complaint about a man loitering near the ice machine, arguing with the clerk, leaving in a dark pickup after refusing to pay for gas. The report listed a name, given by the clerk at the time, Dale. No last name. The description was generic, tall, cap, work boots. The license plate was not recorded because it was supposed to be a minor call, a nothing. Malloy's mouth tightened. Nothing, he said, is nothing. They went back to Hal Whitmore, the clerk, now living under the weight of one night that had turned him into a permanent witness. Hal said he remembered the loiterer. He remembered the boots. He remembered the way the man stared at Maddie when she came in to buy gum that earlier night. Hal hadn't mentioned that detail before, not because he hid it, but because his brain had been sorting trauma like broken glass, and only now, with Malloy's questions, did the shape come back. He said the man's truck had a dent on the rear panel, like someone backed into a post. He said he smelled engine oil when the man walked past, the scent clinging to him. He said the man had a habit of tapping his fingers on the counter, impatient, rhythmic. Thump, thump, thump. That word, thump, sent a ripple through the room, because suddenly the 1017 call didn't feel like an isolated horror, it felt like the echo of a person, a habit, a signature. They ran through lists of men named Dale in the region. There were dozens. They cross-referenced with owners of dark pickups. Still dozens. They cross-referenced with men who had been cited for aggressive behavior, who had records for assault, who worked in trades that used duct tape and zip ties. The list shrank, then grew again. The sheriff's office started visiting mechanics, all shops, hardware stores. They asked about a tall man named Dale with a dark pickup and a rear dent. People shrugged. People lied. People forgot. And then one mechanic, an older man with grease-stained hands, said he remembered a truck like that, late model, dark, with a dent by the taillight. He remembered because the owner refused to fix the dent. Said he liked it, the mechanic said. Said it made the truck look tough. The owner's first name was Dale. The last name might have been Hansen or Henson. The mechanic wasn't sure. He was sure about the eyes, though. Didn't look at you like a person, he said. Looked at you like a tool. They found a Dale Henson in county records. 39 years old in 2001. Worked sporadically in oil fields. Lived in a rented trailer on the edge of a ranch property. Owned a dark pickup registered in his name, with a note on file, vehicle reported in a minor hit and run 2 years earlier, dent in rear panel. They pulled his photo. Hal Whitmore stared at it for a long time. His jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. Could be, he said. Could be him. It wasn't enough. Could be doesn't get you a warrant. Could be doesn't bring a girl home. But it was the closest thing they'd had to a face that fit the frame. They started watching Dale Henson. They ran his background. He'd been arrested once for bar fighting, charges dropped. He'd been cited for trespassing on private land. He'd had a complaint filed by a woman who said he followed her home, but the report went nowhere. His employment history was scattered. His neighbors described him with that vague language people use when they're afraid of being specific: odd, quiet, kept to himself, could be nice, though. That last phrase always sounded like denial. The deputies tailed him as he drove to a hardware store, as he bought rope and a tarp, as he stopped at a diner for coffee and stared at the waitress too long. None of it was illegal. None of it was proof. He went home, parked his truck, shut the door, and the investigators sat in an unmarked car watching a trailer that held a man who might be the answer and might be another dead end. In the distance the highway hummed. It always hummed. Like the world reminding them that time never stops to let you solve a case. They pushed for a search warrant anyway, building probable cause out of scraps: the similar truck, the loitering call, the clerk's partial ID, the payphone incident corridor. A judge denied it. Not enough. Not solid. Not in a county where property rights were treated like scripture. The sheriff left the courthouse with his jaw locked so tight it looked like his face might crack. Karen Rowe heard about the denial and called the sheriff's office, voice trembling with rage. She said, "So what are we waiting for? Another girl?" The deputy on the phone didn't have an answer that could fit inside a sentence. The case kept moving in circles, tightening and loosening, hope and disappointment trading places. Some nights the investigators sat with the recordings, the 1017 call, the filtered audio, the thumps, and listened until their stomachs turned. Some nights they drove the back roads with headlights slicing the dark, imagining the hidden places a person could be kept, imagining the barns with padlocks, the basements, the storage units. And all the while, Dale Henson lived his quiet life in a trailer, going to work, buying groceries, watching TV, sleeping, waking, existing in plain sight, either because he was innocent and being hunted by shadows, or because he was guilty and being protected by the simplest shield in the world: lack of proof. By late 2003, the task force was thinner, budgets shifting, new cases demanding attention, but the Maddie Rowe file refused to be shelved entirely because it had become more than a case. It had become the town's test, the question of whether justice was real or just a word people liked to say in courtrooms. Karen Rowe stood outside the Brazzers Mart on the anniversary with a candle in her hand, the flame trembling in the warm wind, and she looked at the parking lot as if she could see the exact inch of air where her daughter disappeared, as if the space itself held fingerprints. Cars passed on the highway, headlights sweeping over her face, and with every passing vehicle she flinched just slightly, because even now, years later, a dark pickup could still feel like a threat, and the worst part was not knowing if the monster was gone, if it was dead, if it was miles away, or if it was sitting 2 lanes over at a stoplight, tapping its fingers in impatience, waiting for the world to look away again. The 3rd anniversary came and went with the same ritual: candles, prayers, reporters hungry for a fresh angle on an old wound, and then, on a Tuesday that looked like every other Tuesday, the case moved again, not because someone suddenly grew a conscience, not because the kidnapper made a mistake in public, but because a piece of the world that had been silent decided to speak. A landfill bulldozer bit into a mound of trash outside a town called Larkspur and scraped up something pale that shouldn't have been there, something that caught the sun with a clean, unnatural gleam, and the operator killed the engine and climbed down and stared for too long before calling it in, because even a man who has seen everything a county throws away knows when he's looking at the kind of object that refuses to be thrown away. It was a locket, oval, gold-colored, cheap enough to be forgotten, sentimental enough to be kept, The chain snapped, the clasp bent as if it had been yanked hard, and inside was a tiny photo, faded but unmistakable, Maddie Rowe in a high school formal dress, smiling like the future was an open road. The landfill sat 62 miles from the Brazos Mart. 62 miles is not far in Texas. 62 miles is an hour of driving with the radio low and your hands steady. It was close enough to feel connected, close enough to make detectives' mouths go dry. They sealed off the area, brought in forensic techs, sifted through the surrounding layers like archaeologists digging for a civilization that died violently. The locket itself offered little, no clean prints, no clear DNA, too many years of heat and rot. But the location mattered. The landfill served several counties. It had been expanded in phases. If the locket had been dumped with household trash, it would suggest Maddie's belongings had been discarded casually, without ceremony, which felt wrong for a kidnapper who had shown control, calculation, a taste for power. If it had been thrown out intentionally, wrapped, placed, hidden among other refuse, it suggested something else, fear. Someone disposing of evidence. The sheriff's office didn't announce it right away. They couldn't. They needed to verify the photo, trace the locket's origin, figure out whether it was truly Maddie's. Karen Rowe identified it in seconds, hands trembling as if she'd touched live wire. She said Maddie got it for her 16th birthday from an aunt. She said Maddie wore it when she wanted to feel older, when she wanted to feel seen. The aunt confirmed it. A photo existed of Maddie wearing it at a school dance. The chain pattern matched. Suddenly, the case had a new landmark in the darkness, and with it came the sensation that someone had been holding Maddie's life in their hands long after she vanished, deciding what pieces to keep and what pieces to throw into the mouth of the earth. The task force reconvened like a crew called back to a fire that never fully went out. New faces joined, fresh detectives with clean notebooks and the naive hope that new eyes could do what old eyes couldn't. The old guard resented them, then secretly welcomed them, because fatigue can make you defensive, but it can also make you desperate. One of the new detectives, a woman named Elena Sosa, asked for something simple on her first day, every scrap of evidence in one room, laid out, no assumptions, no sacred cows. She didn't care about rumors. She didn't care about the way the town felt. She cared about objects. Times. Distances. She cared about the offender's habits, the human errors that leak through even the tightest plan. She listened to the 1017 call through headphones, eyes closed. She listened again. She didn't speak. Then she asked for the unfiltered version, the raw audio before enhancement. The tech looked surprised. People always wanted the cleaned-up horror, the version that sounded more dramatic. Sosa wanted the noise. In the raw recording, under the breathing and the thump, there was a faint clicking pattern, metallic, repeating, like a turn signal, like a gear shift, like something being pulled and released. The earlier analysts had chalked it up to artifact. Sosa didn't. She asked what kind of phones existed near the Brazos Mart in 2001. She asked where the call could have been placed from. She asked for a map of payphones, real payphones, not the romantic idea of them, the physical locations where a desperate person could reach one without being seen. The map was ugly and incomplete. Phone companies had removed many records. But one cluster stood out, along a back road that cut between the Brazos Mart and the landfill region. There had been a row of payphones outside an old tire shop, phones used mostly by truckers, mostly at night. The shop shut down in 2002. The phones were removed. The concrete pad remained. Sosa drove there, stood on the cracked slab, and listened to the wind. The highway hummed in the distance. She imagined a truck pulled in at 10:15, engine idling, a girl shoved into the shadow, receiver pressed to her ear with a hand over her mouth, a man tapping impatiently on the metal housing. Thump. 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 Then the click, maybe the coin return, maybe the hook switch as the receiver was slammed down. She didn't call it a breakthrough. She called it a possibility with teeth. Possibilities became the only currency the case had. They pulled Dale Henson back into focus, because you don't ignore a face that fits even when you can't prove it fits. Deputies visited his trailer. The place looked the same, dusty steps, a rusted grill, a satellite dish pointed toward the sky like a begging hand. But Dale wasn't there. The neighbor said he left weeks ago, packed up quick, didn't say where he was going. The landlord said Henson had stopped paying rent 2 months earlier and then vanished. No forwarding address. No new vehicle registration. No job record. It was the first time in years the task force felt something close to adrenaline, because innocent men don't always flee, but guilty men often do when they sense eyes tightening around them. The sheriff's office put out a bolo. They ran his name through state systems. Nothing. They checked jails. Nothing. They checked hospitals. Nothing. He had dissolved, and dissolution is either panic or planning, and both are terrifying. Karen Rowe heard the word, missing, attached to Dale Henson and laughed once, sharply, a sound like glass. Now he's missing, she said, and everyone cares. The bitterness in her voice was thick enough to choke on. She asked if they could search the trailer now. Without Henson present, without his permission, it still required legal dance. But the landlord agreed to let them in for a welfare check, and the deputies entered with gloves and flashlights, the air inside stale with old smoke and oil. At first, it was disappointingly ordinary: dirty dishes, a recliner with a cigarette burn, a stack of magazines, tools on a counter. Then they found a locked metal cabinet in the bedroom closet, heavier than you'd expect for a trailer. The key wasn't on any ring they could see. They pried it open. Inside were items that made the room go silent: a bundle of zip ties, a roll of duct tape, a coil of rope, a pair of women's underwear sealed in a plastic bag, and a disposable camera still in its packaging, expired. None of it was illegal on its face. In Texas, rope and tape are everyday objects. But together, arranged neatly, stored with care, they looked less like supplies and more like a kit. And at the back of the cabinet was a manila envelope. On it, in block letters, one word: Maddie. The detectives didn't open it like normal people. They opened it like bomb technicians, slow, controlled, hands steady despite the pulse in their fingertips. Inside were photocopies of newspaper clippings about the kidnapping, photographs cut from flyers, and one thing that didn't belong: a strip of paper with a phone number written on it in the same careful block style as the threat letter. The number was old. It belonged to a payphone line that had been disconnected years earlier, the tire shop phones. The connection hit like a jolt. Not proof. Not a confession. But a link. A man who might have watched the case, who might have collected it, who might have been near the corridor where the 1017 call could have happened. The sheriff's jaw tightened so hard his teeth creaked. They bagged everything. They sent it to the lab. They ran the underwear for DNA and found traces, male, partial, not in the database. The duct tape roll was tested. No usable prints. The zip ties were clean. The envelope was clean. It was as if someone had prepared for scrutiny, wiping down the pieces he didn't want to speak. But not everything can be silenced. On the inside seam of the plastic bag holding the underwear, a tech found a faint ridge of dried skin cells, touch DNA, the kind of evidence that was still new enough then to feel like science fiction. The lab extracted a partial profile. It didn't match Dale Henson. It didn't match Maddie. It matched no one. That meant either Henson was careful enough to avoid leaving himself on his own kit, or he wasn't the offender at all, or he wasn't alone. The case widened again, like a wound you can't suture. The discovery didn't stay quiet. Someone leaked it, because someone always leaks, and suddenly reporters were back on the courthouse steps with microphones and breathless tone, talking about disturbing evidence, possible suspect, new lead. The town reacted like it always did, half frenzy, half dread. Some people celebrated, certain the monster had finally been cornered. Others looked at their neighbors with suspicion, because when a suspect vanishes, the fear doesn't vanish with him, it spreads, it turns every dark driveway into a hiding place. Karen Rowe went on television again, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, and said she didn't care who got credit, she didn't care how many years had passed, she wanted her daughter back, alive or dead, because not knowing was a torture that never slept. In that storm of attention, new tips poured in: and among the nonsense, one call arrived that made Detective Sosa sit up straight. It came from a woman in her 60s in a town near the landfill. She said she'd been afraid to speak for years because her husband was the kind of man you don't cross, but he died last winter, and now she was tired of carrying the weight. She said in the summer of 2001 her husband came home late one night with mud on his boots and scratches on his arms, and he burned his clothes in a barrel behind the shed. She said he owned a dark pickup with a dent near the tail light. She said he had a friend named Dale who sometimes stayed over, sometimes worked with him on oil field jobs. She said once, months after Maddie vanished, she found a girl's bracelet in the glove compartment, and when she asked about it her husband slapped her so hard her ear rang for days and told her to never touch his truck again. The woman's voice shook as she spoke, but her details were sharp, the kind of sharp that comes from living with fear. Sosa wrote everything down, heart pounding, because suddenly Dale Henson wasn't a lone shadow, he was part of a larger shape. They asked for the husband's name. They checked records. The man was real, dead, never convicted of anything major, just a handful of arrests that evaporated in plea deals and dismissals. He had property, acreage near the landfill corridor, a shed, an old well. The judge who had once denied warrants listened to the new information and finally signed paper with a pen that scratched loudly in the quiet room. Deputies drove out at dawn, trucks kicking dust, warrant in hand, the sky turning pale like a bruise fading. They searched the shed first. It smelled of gasoline and old wood. Tools hung in neat rows. A tarp was folded on a shelf. Under the tarp, the ground looked disturbed. They dug. The soil gave easily, too easily, and that's what made everyone's skin tighten, because earth that's been turned remembers the shape of shovels. They found a plastic bag. Inside were objects, small, personal, women's earrings, a hair clip, a cracked compact mirror, a keychain shaped like a heart. Not Maddie's locket, not her bracelet, but the kind of items that belong to girls who expect to go home. They found a second bag. Then a third. The deeper they dug, the heavier the air became, because objects like that don't gather in the ground by accident. They belong to a pattern. They belong to a predator's collection. And when they reached the old well and shined a light down into its throat, the beam disappeared into blackness so deep it felt like staring into the mouth of the case itself, and for one terrible second, every person standing there imagined the same thing: bones, cloth, silence, and the only sound was the wind moving through grass like whispers trying to escape. By nightfall the search team was still there, floodlights burning, cameras rolling, the town holding its breath again, because the ground had finally offered something back, and whatever it was going to change the case forever, either by proving Maddie's fate, or by proving the nightmare was larger than anyone dared to admit, and in the middle of it all sat the simplest, most violent truth: someone had been close enough to smell this community's fear for years, close enough to watch them beg, close enough to vanish when the pressure turned, and still the road outside the Brazzers Mart kept humming under the same fluorescent lights, as if the world had never been taught to stop. The floodlights made the pasture look like a stage built for a confession, harsh white beams cutting through the Texas night, turning every blade of grass into a needle, every shadow into a suspect, and the men and women moving through that light didn't speak much because speech felt disrespectful in a place where the ground was starting to tell stories it had swallowed for years. The old well sat there like an accusation, a circular mouth rimmed with cracked concrete, weeds choking its edges, the kind of relic you don't notice until you're forced to, and when the investigators leaned over and lowered a camera on a cable, the screen showed nothing at first but darkness and a slow spin of dust drifting like ash. Someone adjusted the focus. The beam from the mounted light sharpened. The walls of the shaft appeared, damp and streaked, stones embedded in dirt like teeth. 10 feet down. 20. 30. The air smelled wrong, not the clean mineral smell of water, but a sour, stale breath that made throats tighten. The camera kept descending, and the cable hummed quietly, and for a moment everyone held their breath as if the act of breathing might disturb whatever lay below. Then the light caught on something pale that wasn't stone. A flash. Curved. Smooth. The camera rotated slightly and the image settled into shape, something bone-like, something that made a deputy's hand rise to his mouth without thinking. The sheriff stood perfectly still, his face rigid, because after years of chasing a ghost, The smallest hint of physical truth hits like a punch. The tech monitoring the screen swallowed hard and said the only word that mattered, possible remains. No one cheered. No one spoke. There are no victories inside a well. They called in a specialized recovery team before dawn, because you don't send a rookie down into the dark with a rope and hope. The night stretched thin, wind hissing through grass, insects vibrating like static, and in the distance, beyond the floodlights, the rest of the county slept as if nothing had changed. But on that patch of land, time began to collapse. The bags of jewelry and hair clips and cracked compacts were laid out on a folding table under plastic, each item photographed, measured, numbered, and every number felt like a tally of fear. Detectives moved between the table and the shed and the well with that tense, efficient energy that comes from knowing you are standing on the edge of something massive. And at the center of it all was a name that refused to leave anyone's mind, Maddie. Karen Rowe arrived before the sun, because she always arrived, because she had trained herself to show up for every scrap of possibility as if her presence could force the universe to be honest. Her face looked carved, pale in the early light, eyes too bright, hair pulled back tight, and she stood behind the tape line with her hands clasped as if holding them apart would make them shake. The sheriff walked over and tried to speak gently, but his gentleness was thin, stretched over urgency. He explained that they were processing the scene, that they didn't know anything yet, that they needed time. Karen didn't ask for comfort. She asked for facts. "Is it her?" she said, and when he didn't answer immediately, she nodded like she'd already understood what the silence meant. The human body can survive for years without answers, but it never gets used to them. The recovery team arrived in a convoy of unmarked vehicles, calm faces, hard helmets, ropes coiled like sleeping snakes. They secured tripods, tested anchors, measured the well's depth, checked the integrity of the rim. Safety protocols spoken in clipped tones. Everything precise. Because if you made a mistake here, you didn't just risk evidence, you risked a life. The first technician descended slowly, boots scraping the wall, light strapped to their chest. From above, you could see only the top of the helmet until even that vanished into black, swallowed by the shaft. A rope creaked. A radio hissed. The sheriff stared into the well like he expected it to stare back. Minutes passed like hours. Then the radio crackled with a quiet, steady voice from below. Confirmed. Human remains. Not a question. Not a maybe. Confirmed. The words moved through the air like cold water poured down someone's spine. Karen Rowe's knees buckled slightly and a deputy beside her stepped closer, ready to catch her, but she stayed upright through pure will, the kind of will that has nothing left except itself. The recovery team below continued, describing what they saw in careful language: multiple bones, fragmented, mixed with debris, clothing scraps, an old purse strap. They spoke as if naming the objects could keep emotion out of it. But emotion seeped in anyway, because objects in a well aren't neutral. They are the end of a path. They began the slow extraction. Bucket lifts. Mesh bags. Each piece placed into separate containers, labeled, sealed. The process took hours. The sun climbed and the day warmed and the sweat began to sting eyes, but no one left. Reporters gathered at the far edge of the property, cameras pointed like weapons. The sheriff refused statements. This wasn't a press event. This was a grave. And then another voice arrived, one the task force hadn't expected, a state investigator from a neighboring county, a man with a thick file folder tucked under his arm, who walked straight to Detective Sosa and asked to speak privately. Sosa stepped aside. The man opened the folder and showed her photographs, missing persons flyers from the late 90s and early 2000s, girls from small towns, last seen near highways, last seen near convenience stores, last seen at dusk, last seen alone. Different names. Same haunting emptiness behind the words. The investigator said he'd heard about the search and the recovered items and wanted to know one thing: had they found a keychain shaped like a heart with a chipped red enamel corner? Sosa's stomach tightened. She led him to the evidence table. One of the bagged items matched. The man exhaled like he'd been holding air for years. "That belonged to my case," he said. "A girl named Brandy Keller." missing since 1999. The air seemed to drop in temperature even under the bright sun. The case widened again, violently, not by speculation but by the blunt confirmation that the ground was not holding just one family's nightmare. It was holding a collection. Sosa returned to the sheriff with that information and watched his face harden into something darker than fatigue. Because if this property connected to multiple missing girls, then Maddie's abduction might not have been a lone strike. It might have been part of a pattern, a predator's routine, a highway hunter who understood that small towns are trusting and roads are long and night is generous. The sheriff looked across the pasture and, for the first time in years, seemed genuinely afraid, not of failing, but of what success might reveal. They searched deeper. The warrant expanded. Cadaver dogs paced and stopped and sat and stared at certain spots like they were pointing with their bodies. Another patch of soil near the fence line tested suspicious. They dug. The earth gave reluctantly. They found another plastic bag, then a box, then a rusted ammo concealed tight. Inside the can were photographs, Polaroids, some faded, some glossy, some taken in harsh flash. The images were of objects, not people, a bracelet on a palm, a sneaker on a car seat, a lock of hair on newspaper, a locket held up against a dashboard. Trophies without the trophy shown. The kind of imagery that makes your skin crawl because it suggests a mind that enjoys possession more than it enjoys disclosure. The sheriff ordered the concealed and removed immediately. The media could not get their hands on this. The town could not stomach seeing what the offender had collected. But the offender, the man the tipster had described, dead, buried, beyond prosecution, could no longer defend himself. His name, once just another line in county records, began to take on a weight that bent the case toward him like gravity. His wife, the one who finally called, sat in an interview room that evening, hands folded so tightly her knuckles looked white. She repeated her story, and every repetition seemed to peel back another layer. She said her husband and Dale had worked together on and off, driving out to remote sites, staying gone overnight, coming back dirty and wired. She said there were times her husband's truck smelled like bleach. She said he kept a padlock on the shed and told her it was tools, and she knew better than to ask. She said once, in late 2001, she heard a muffled sound from the shed, like someone coughing, and when she stepped outside her husband appeared in the doorway as if he'd materialized from the air, blocking her path, his eyes flat, and told her to go back inside. She did. She lived by rules that kept her alive. Sosa asked about Dale Henson, where he went, what he feared, what he bragged about when he thought no one was listening. The woman hesitated, then said something that made the room go still. She said Dale used to talk about how easy it is to make people disappear in Texas. He said it with a laugh once, half drunk, as if it was a joke. She didn't laugh. She said another time he mentioned a phone call, a little call to keep em praying. She asked what he meant and he smirked and said, "You gotta give em something." Her stomach turned even as she told it. She said she didn't know if he was serious or just cruel. She said she hoped it was just cruelty. People always hope that. They pulled Dale Henson's file again and looked at it with new eyes. His disappearance from his trailer wasn't just suspicious now, it was alarming. The team traced his movements through old transactions. A gas purchase in a town near the landfill. A hardware store receipt in a county adjacent to the rest area payphone. A money order purchased and cashed in a border town. Each breadcrumb suggested motion away from the heat, away from the eyes, and the timing, just weeks before the warrant was served, felt like a man sensing the air change and deciding to vanish before the storm hit. The sheriff put out updated bulletins. Dale's face was printed again, older now, more severe, but still the same eyes in the photo, eyes that could slide past you without seeing you. The lab began the brutal work of identification. The remains from the well were sent for analysis. The process was slow, methodical, full of the kind of waiting that drives families insane. Forensic anthropologists determined there were at least 2 sets of human remains in the well, commingled, damaged, time-worn. 2. Not 1. The town's nightmare multiplied. The teeth were examined. Dental records requested. Bone fragments tested for mitochondrial DNA. Karen Rowe gave a sample without flinching. She'd been waiting years for the world to ask her for something concrete. She offered it like a sacrifice. While the lab worked, detectives followed the property's history like a trail of ownership and secrecy. They found that the dead husband had purchased the land in the mid-90s. He had installed the shed himself. He had poured fresh concrete around the well rim in 1998, a fact buried in a permit record that meant nothing until it meant everything. Why reinforce a well you don't use? Why do it in summer when the ground is hard and the heat punishes you? The answer sat heavy in everyone's mind, and yet the law needed proof, and proof was slow. The press finally got enough to run with. Headlines appeared like knives: bones in Texas well, linked to missing teens. The town reeled. Parents who had been cautious became paranoid. Old arguments flared. People accused the sheriff of hiding things for years. Others accused the media of exploiting pain. Karen Rowe ignored all of it. She moved through the days like a person underwater, hearing voices as muffled echoes, because the only sound that mattered was the lab phone ringing. She kept the ringer turned up. She slept in her clothes. She sat at the kitchen table with Maddie's senior photo propped up in front of her like it was a person she could speak to. Sometimes she did speak to it. She told Maddie the truth, that they were closer than they'd ever been, that the ground was giving up secrets, that she wasn't going to let her be forgotten in a well like trash. And then the call came, not from the lab, not from the sheriff, but from a patrol officer in a dusty substation who had just pulled over a dark pickup with a dent near the taillight in a county 3 hours away. It was the kind of stop that happens 1,000 times: speeding, broken taillight, expired registration, and the officer almost let it go with a warning until he looked at the driver's license and saw the name, and felt that small electric click in his gut that every cop lives for and fears at the same time. The name was not Dale Henson. The name was another man, younger. But the officer recognized the face from the bulletins anyway because the face had been printed so many times it had seeped into the brain of every lawman in Texas: the same sharp cheekbones, the same eyes, the same expression that looked bored by rules. The driver said his name was Travis Morrow. The officer asked if he'd ever gone by another name. The driver smiled slightly and said no. The officer asked him to step out of the truck. The driver's hands didn't shake. He stepped out like he'd done it before, like traffic stops were just small interruptions. The officer glanced into the cab and saw, on the passenger seat, a folded piece of paper with block letters visible on the edge, letters that made the officer's mouth go dry because they looked too familiar, too careful, too deliberate. He asked about it. The driver's smile vanished. The air changed. In the second between question and answer, the officer's radio crackled with a reminder from dispatch: use caution, possible connection to a major kidnapping case, backup en route. The officer kept his voice calm anyway, because calm is armor. He asked the driver again to identify himself. The driver stared back and, for a heartbeat, the two men were locked in that silent negotiation where everything hangs on who blinks first. Then the driver moved, fast, sudden, and the officer's hand went to his weapon and the world snapped into that sharp, narrow tunnel where you can hear your own pulse louder than traffic, and in that instant, on a sun-baked road under a sky too bright for horror, the Maddie Rowe case, years of waiting, years of darkness, lunged forward again, not toward comfort, not toward closure, but toward the kind of confrontation that makes a community hold its breath and realize the monster might not be a story buried in the past after all. The driver's hand moved with the casual speed of someone who'd rehearsed panic until it looked like calm: a quick dip toward the waistband, a shift of weight, a half step back toward the open door of the pickup, and the patrol officer felt the temperature of the moment drop, because you can tell the difference between a man reaching for a wallet and a man reaching for control, and when the officer barked, "Hands!" Now, it wasn't authority, it was survival, the kind of command that comes from bone. Instinct, the kind that turns a roadside into a thin strip of battlefield. The driver froze for a fraction of a second, eyes unreadable, then slowly lifted his hands in a gesture that could have been compliance if not for the angle of his shoulders, the way his body stayed coiled like a spring, and the officer kept his own voice steady, kept his own hands steady, because steady is what keeps you alive when everything inside you wants to run. The backup siren was still far a faint wail swallowed by heat and distance, and on the highway cars kept sliding past, oblivious, sun flashing off windshields like strobe lights, the world continuing its dumb momentum as if it didn't understand what was about to happen. "Step away from the vehicle," the officer said, and the man did, one step, then another, slow as a performance, turning slightly so the officer could see his sides, his hands still lifted, still empty, and yet the officer's gut screamed that emptiness wasn't safety, because an empty hand can still strike, can still run, can still reach for something hidden in the cab. The officer glanced once at the passenger seat where the folded paper lay, block letters visible on the edge like a whisper of the past, and something in his chest tightened with the sick certainty that this stop wasn't random anymore, it was gravity, the case pulling toward a person at last, whether it was the right person or just another decoy the universe liked to throw at desperate communities. "Name again," the officer said. "Travis Morrow," the man replied, voice smooth, almost bored, like he was ordering food. "You ever live in Brazos County?" the officer asked, watching the man's eyes for a flicker of recognition, any crack. The man's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Never heard of it." The officer swallowed his own anger and forced his tone to stay neutral. "Any reason your truck matches a bulletin we've got out?" "Lot of trucks in Texas," the man said, shrugging with his hands still up, shrugging like this was inconvenient but not threatening, and that shrug was the first truly dangerous thing he'd done, because it told the officer he didn't feel fear, he felt irritation, and irritation in a man being questioned by a cop is often the last mask before violence. The officer took one step closer, enough to close distance, not enough to lose reaction time, and said, "Turn around. Hands behind your head." For a second the man didn't move. In that pause, everything tightened, the officer's grip, the air itself, the tension between them like wire pulled taut. Then the man turned, too fast, and the officer's hand snapped up, weapon drawn in a smooth motion drilled into muscle memory, and the driver's body pivoted toward the open door, lunging, and the officer shouted and moved, boots scraping asphalt, heart exploding in his chest, because now it was clear, this wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a decision. The driver dug into the cab, the officer lunged after him, and in that instant the folded paper slid off the seat and fluttered to the floorboard like a dying bird. The officer saw it just long enough to catch a phrase in thick block letters, "Stop," before the driver's shoulder slammed the door and the engine roared, and the pickup jolted forward, tires screeching, dust spitting up from the shoulder. The officer stumbled back, avoided being clipped by inches, and then he was running to his cruiser, radio in his fist, voice sharp as a blade as he called it in, suspect fleeing, dark pickup, dented rear, possible connection to Maddie Rowe case, heading westbound, and the dispatcher's reply crackled with urgency that made the hair on his arms lift. Units were rolling. Air support requested. The case that had been paper and whispers for years suddenly had speed and exhaust and a real vehicle carving through real roads. The chase tore across county lines like a wound ripping open. The pickup weaved through traffic with a reckless confidence that suggested familiarity with pursuit, familiarity with risk, the kind of familiarity that comes from a life lived near the edge. The officer kept distance, not too close to provoke a crash, not too far to lose him, siren screaming, lights slicing the afternoon into flashes of red and blue. Civilians pulled over, wide-eyed, phones lifted, capturing the chaos like a movie they didn't understand they were starring in. The radio filled with voices, other units joining, coordinates, roadblocks, caution advisories, and somewhere in that noise the officer could hear his own breath, loud and fast, a reminder that fear is physical, no matter how trained you are. The pickup exited onto a smaller road, then another, shedding the highway like a snake shedding skin, cutting into ranch land where fences ran endless and the horizon looked too far away to ever reach. Dust plumed behind the truck. The officer followed, his cruiser bucking over rough pavement, the map in his mind trying to keep up with turns. The driver knew these roads. That knowledge felt like a fingerprint. It felt like confession without words. Ahead, another patrol unit attempted a spike strip. The driver swerved, just enough, and the truck clipped the edge of the spikes anyway. There was a sharp pop as tires burst, rubber shredding, and the pickup fishtailed violently, dust exploding in a brown cloud. For a moment it looked like it would roll. For a moment the officer's stomach dropped, because a crash would end the chase and maybe end the only living lead they'd had in years. But the driver fought the wheel, muscles rigid, and the truck straightened, wobbling on ruined tires, sparks flying as rims bit asphalt. The driver kept going, stubborn as an animal with a trap on its leg, and the officer realized something cold: this man would rather destroy his own vehicle than be caught. That's not the behavior of a guy with a traffic warrant. That's not a guy afraid of a fine. That's the behavior of a man running from a hole in the ground full of secrets. The pickup turned onto a narrow dirt track that cut between scrub and mesquite, a path barely visible unless you knew it existed. The patrol cruiser followed, gravel pinging against the undercarriage, the siren now sounding absurd in the open land, a desperate noise swallowed by sky. The truck slowed as the shredded tires lost grip. The driver tried to accelerate anyway. The engine screamed. The vehicle lurched. The track ended at a locked ranch gate, a high metal barrier with a chain and padlock. The driver hit the brakes too late, slammed into it with a metallic shriek, and the gate shuddered but held. The truck stalled. Dust rolled over everything like smoke. The officer stopped his cruiser at an angle, weapon up, door used as cover, and shouted commands into the dust: "Driver! Hands up! Out of the vehicle!" He heard movement inside the cab. He saw a silhouette shift. He tightened his grip. Other units arrived, sliding into position, forming a semicircle of weapons and adrenaline. The driver's door creaked open slowly, like the scene itself was reluctant to reveal him, and the man stepped out, hands raised again, face streaked with sweat and dust, eyes still disturbingly calm for someone boxed in by guns. For a heartbeat, it looked like surrender. Then the man's gaze flicked toward the brush, measuring distance, and the officer knew with absolute certainty, that calm wasn't acceptance, it was calculation. The man moved, sudden, and the world snapped again into that narrow tunnel. A deputy shouted. Someone fired a warning that cracked the air. The driver dropped and bolted, sprinting toward the mesquite, legs pumping, dust kicking up behind him. The officers ran, boots pounding, shouting, the brush whipping at sleeves, thorns clawing at skin. The man ran like someone who'd run before, weaving through scrub with practiced angles, disappearing behind a low ridge. For a few seconds he was only a moving shape, then he was gone, swallowed by the land. They searched. Dogs came. Helicopters thumped overhead, blades chopping the air. Deputies fanned out with rifles, scanning the brush for movement. The sun sank lower, turning the sky orange, the kind of sunset that looks beautiful until you remember beauty doesn't care about human suffering. The dogs caught a scent line, then lost it at a dry creek bed where the wind and dust tore it apart. The helicopter spotted nothing but cattle and fences and long shadows. And gradually the sick truth settled in: the man had vanished again. He'd done it in less than a minute, dissolving into terrain, as if the land itself had opened a trapdoor. But the truck remained. They returned to it like it was a body. The door was still open. The cab smelled of sweat, gasoline, and something faintly chemical, cleaner, maybe, the ghost of bleach. On the floorboard lay the folded paper that had fluttered down in the first moment, now crumpled, edges dirty. An officer picked it up with gloves, unfolded it carefully, and everyone leaned in as if expecting a bomb. It wasn't a bomb. It was worse. It was writing in thick, deliberate block letters, the kind of letters that look like someone is trying to erase their own personality, and the message wasn't a threat this time. It was directions. A simple list of roads. A time. A note: no lights. No stops. And at the bottom, one sentence that made Detective Sosa's throat go tight when she saw it later: if she cries, she stays. A command. A rule. A philosophy. They searched the truck methodically. Under the seat, a spool of thin wire. In the glove compartment, a map folded and refolded, corners softened by use, with certain back roads circled in pen. In the center console, a prepaid phone, battery removed, dead. In the bed, an old torp, stiff with dried mud. And tucked behind the passenger seat, pressed into the seam of the upholstery as if hidden in haste, a plastic sleeve containing photocopied newspaper clippings, Maddie's face, the headline about bones in the well, the story about a suspect who vanished from his trailer. The driver had been following. Watching. collecting. Feeding himself the story the way some people feed themselves junk food. That alone didn't prove he took Maddie, but it proved he needed her case in his hands, needed to own it in some way, and ownership is the seed of obsession. The truck's VIN came back clean, registered to Travis Morrow in a different county. But the registration address was a rented P.O. box. The insurance was minimal. The phone number on file was disconnected. It was a shell built to look ordinary. They ran the driver's fingerprints from the traffic stop ID check, because the officer had done it right, he'd scanned them at the roadside before the chase erupted, and the system returned nothing at first, then something strange, a partial match flagged from an old arrest record in the late 80s under a different name, a name that made the sheriff's office go quiet when it appeared on the screen because it was a name they had said so many times it felt like a ghost, Dale Henson. Not a full confirmation yet, but enough to feel the pieces click into a shape. Dale hadn't disappeared into nothing. Dale had stepped sideways into another identity. Dale had kept moving, kept breathing, kept living while families waited for phones to ring. The officer who initiated the stop sat in a chair that evening, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was draining, and stared at the unfolded paper with the block letters, and the words in his mouth tasted like ash as he said, "He looked right at me like he'd done this 100 times. Sosa took the evidence back to her table of maps and pins and began drawing new lines. The gate where the truck crashed was not random, it was a boundary to a large ranch property, private land with miles of brush and old structures. She looked at the directions on the paper and felt a cold sweep through her chest, because the route listed wasn't just any route. It traced an old corridor between the Brazzers Mart, the rest area payphone, and the landfill region like a thread connecting every haunting point they'd pinned to the board. The man who ran today had driven those roads long before. He'd used them like arteries. They secured the ranch perimeter and obtained an emergency warrant for the land beyond the gate, and as deputies cut the chain and swung the metal barrier open, the sound echoed across the field like a door unlocking after years. The search teams moved in at twilight, flashlights bobbing, radios murmuring, boots crunching dry grass, and with every step the air felt heavier, charged with the possibility of finding something that would end the case and the dread of finding something that would prove it was worse than they'd imagined. They found an old outbuilding half collapsed, then a second, then a third. In one, the floorboards were stained dark in irregular patches. In another, there was a hook bolted to a beam overhead, too sturdy, too deliberate. In the dirt nearby, a shallow pit filled with ash and charred fabric scraps, the remnants of something burned not for warmth but for erasure. No body. No Maddie. Not yet. Not there. But in the far corner of the ranch, tucked behind a stand of mesquite, they found a small concrete pad, cracked and overgrown, and beside it a rusted metal post with bolts that once held something upright. A payphone post. A relic. A place where a receiver might have hung, where a call might have been made in panic, where someone might have been forced to breathe into the line while a man tapped and muttered and ended it when he was done. Sosa stood there and listened to the wind. It sounded like static. It sounded like a recording being rewound. And in her mind she could hear that 1017 call again, the thump, the breath, the voice, and she understood something with sudden clarity: the offender didn't just take people. He staged fear. He curated it. He left just enough behind to keep the town looking, just enough to feed himself the power of being watched. Somewhere out in the brush, Dale Henson, if it was him, was still moving, still hiding, still alive, and the most brutal part was that the case had finally found its feet again, finally found speed and heat and real evidence, yet the man at the center of it had slipped away once more, leaving only a truck full of dark suggestions and a set of block letter rules that read like the private scripture of a predator. And as night closed over the ranch and the searchlight swept across empty grass, the community's old question returned with sharper teeth than ever: if you can run this far for this long and still vanish at the edge of capture, what else have you hidden in the spaces where no one thinks to look, and how many years have you been counting on the world to blink? Night on that ranch didn't feel like night in town, where porch lights blink and televisions glow behind curtains, where a siren in the distance is just another sound. Out here the dark was thick, physical, a weight you could taste, and every flashlight beam looked like a fragile thread trying to stitch meaning onto a landscape that had been designed to swallow it. Deputies moved in lines, boots crunching dry grass, radios whispering in clipped bursts, and the helicopter's rotors beat overhead like a gigantic pulse, but the land stayed stubbornly silent, absorbing all that noise without giving anything back. Detective Sosa stood by the rusted payphone post and let her light trace the bolts, the faded outline where a metal box once sat, the concrete pad cracked like an old scar, and she felt anger flare hot in her throat because this wasn't just a crime scene detail, this was theater, a place built not for necessity but for control, a place where someone could force a human being into the smallest possible box of terror and then decide when the world would hear it, decide when the world would be allowed to know she existed. They found footprints near the brush line, fresh, hurried, the kind that scuffed dirt rather than press cleanly into it, leading away from where the truck had stopped, weaving toward a shallow creek bed and then disappearing into rock and scrub. Dogs caught the scent and pulled hard on their leads, barking sharp, frantic, then lost it again in a swirl of wind and dust, and the handlers cursed under their breath because scent is a fragile thing out here, a delicate thread shredded by heat, by distance, by the simple fact that Texas is big enough to hide 1,000 nightmares. The deputies split into teams and pushed farther, sweeping past rusted farm equipment and half-collapsed fencing, past a line of trees that looked black against a sky full of stars too bright to feel kind. One team found a small cluster of cigarette butts behind an old water trough, the filters crushed, the tobacco still damp inside like they'd been dropped recently. Another team found tire tracks near a hidden gate, narrow and shallow, like a vehicle that didn't weigh much, a vehicle that could slip through places a patrol cruiser couldn't. They radioed coordinates. They marked the ground. And every mark felt like chasing a man who was always a step ahead, a man who knew which paths were watched and which were forgotten. Back at the crashed pickup, crime scene techs worked under portable lights, gloved hands moving with precision, because when the suspect escapes, the vehicle becomes your witness, your only captive. They dusted the steering wheel, the gear shift, the door handle, the mirror, and finally the prints came up clean enough to sing, partials at first, then one good thumbprint on the inside of the passenger door, placed exactly where someone would grip to pull it shut fast. They ran it through state, then federal, then the deeper systems that catch the ghosts who change names. The first time it came back, it didn't hit Dale Henson. It hit nothing. Then a technician tried a different algorithm, fed the partial into an older archive, and the machine coughed up a match that made everyone stare at the screen like it was lying, Dale Henson, but under an alias from 1987, a name attached to a juvenile record that had been sealed and forgotten. He had been a kid once. He had been caught once. And then he'd learned what predators learn early, how to slip through cracks. The sheriff didn't allow celebration. A name on a screen didn't put a body in a grave. It didn't put a girl back in her mother's arms. It didn't even put Dale Henson in handcuffs. But it did something else, something that hit the town like a blunt instrument. It made the monster real. It gave the fear a face that could be printed again, circulated again, hunted again. The sheriff called a press conference at midnight anyway because silence was no longer an option, because rumors had already started crawling through phone lines like insects, and he stood under harsh lights with sweat shining on his forehead and said, carefully, that law enforcement was pursuing an active suspect connected to the Maddie Rowe investigation, that a vehicle had been recovered, that the suspect had fled on foot, and that the public should not approach anyone matching the description. He did not say Dale Henson's name out loud yet, not until they had more than a fingerprint. But the reporters didn't need him to. Someone always leaks the name. Someone always wants to be the first to say it. By morning, Karen Rowe was awake before the sun, sitting at her kitchen table like she'd been sitting there for years, coffee untouched, phone in her hand, television muted but glowing. When she saw the footage of the crashed pickup, the dust, the gate, the flashing lights, she didn't look relieved. Relief is for people who get endings. Karen looked sharpened, like a blade that had been honed on waiting. She drove out to the sheriff's office the second it opened, walked past deputies who tried to stop her, and demanded to see Detective Sosa. Sosa met her in the hallway, eyes tired, hair pulled back tight, and Karen said, "Is it him?" not as a question, but as a challenge. Sosa didn't lie. She said, "We have strong evidence," and Karen's throat worked like she was swallowing something that hurt. "Strong," she repeated. "I've been living on strong for years." Sosa led her into a small room and placed a photo on the table, the crumpled block letter note from the truck, flattened and photographed clean. Karen stared at the words, no lights. No stops. If she cries, she stays, and for a long moment she didn't move. Then her hand lifted slowly, hovering over the ink as if she might feel the writer's skin through paper. He wrote like this, Karen whispered, voice cracking. He wrote like this in the letter. Sosa asked if she meant the threat letter. Karen nodded hard, eyes glistening. The same, she said. The same stupid careful letters. It wasn't forensic handwriting analysis. It wasn't court proof. But it was a mother's recognition, and in cases like this, mothers are often the first people to notice patterns everyone else dismisses as coincidence. They moved fast on the ranch search because time was no longer a slow drip, time was a chase. Deputies expanded the perimeter. Rangers arrived with horses to cover brush too dense for vehicles. Infrared from the helicopter scanned the land at night, searching for the heat signature of a human body hiding under mesquite. They set up roadblocks on routes leading out. They checked every passing truck, every sedan, every ranch hand's vehicle, every stranger's face. Dale Henson's photo was everywhere now, on dashboards, on clipboards, on phone screens. People who had never cared about a cold case suddenly cared very much when they heard there was a man in the brush with nothing to lose. But Dale did not run like a panicked animal. Dale ran like a man who planned to run. On the second day, a rancher 20 miles north called 911 and said he found his barn door open and his ATV missing, along with a jug of water and a box of ammunition. There were muddy boot prints on the concrete floor, fresh, leading out the back. The deputy who responded found a cigarette but crushed near the threshold, the same uncommon brand as the one from the rest area years earlier, and something else, an old Polaroid photo tucked under a coil of rope on a shelf, as if left behind by accident or spite. The photo showed a locket held up against a dashboard, sunlight catching on gold, and behind it, blurred but visible, a stretch of highway and a signpost, Brazos marked 2 miles. The date stamp in the corner read 08-2001. The deputy's stomach turned. Evidence like that doesn't just appear. It's a message, a breadcrumb thrown by someone who enjoys being followed, someone who enjoys control even while fleeing. They bagged it. They raced it to the lab. Sosa stared at the photo and felt a cold wave roll through her chest, because now they weren't just dealing with a man trying to escape, they were dealing with a man still performing, still feeding himself the power of watching law enforcement scramble. The handwriting expert compared the threat letter to the truck note. The result came back with the kind of language that sounds neutral but lands hard, highly consistent, probable common authorship. The expert noted the same spacing, the same blunt angles, the same way certain letters, E, A, R, were formed with a careful, almost childish discipline. It wasn't a confession. It was another rope tied to the same knot. Then the lab called about the well. The forensic anthropologist's voice on the phone was calm, clinical, but Sosa could hear the gravity behind it. The remains recovered from the well included multiple individuals, yes, but one set, had enough viable DNA to attempt a familial match with Karen Rowe's sample. The lab ran it. The system processed it. The match probability was so high the numbers felt obscene. The remains were consistent with Maddie Rowe. When Sosa walked into the sheriff's office with that news, the air changed. People who had been moving for days without sleep stopped mid-step. The sheriff closed his eyes for a second like he'd been hit. A deputy swore softly and then went quiet. Because there it was, the thing everyone feared and begged for at the same time. Confirmation. The end of not knowing. The beginning of something worse, knowing she was gone. Sosa insisted on telling Karen in person. The sheriff came with her. They drove to the row house, the same small home that had been holding its breath for years, the porch light always on like a beacon, the yard trimmed too neatly because control is what grief clings to when everything else is chaos. Karen opened the door before they knocked, as if she'd felt them coming. She looked at their faces and knew. That's the horror of long cases, families learn to read law enforcement expressions like weather. Karen didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She took one step backward, hand on the door frame, and her voice came out thin, almost polite. "Tell me," she said. The sheriff spoke slowly, carefully, as if words could break something fragile. He said the lab had made an identification. He said they were confident. He said they were sorry. He said they would continue the investigation. Karen's eyes stayed on his mouth, tracking every syllable like it mattered. When he finished, she nodded once, small, controlled, then her knees gave out anyway, not dramatically, not with a wail, but with the quiet surrender of a body that has been holding itself upright through sheer will. Sosa caught her elbow. Karen didn't cry at first. Her face went blank, like someone had shut off a light inside her. Then she whispered Maddie's name, over and over, like she was trying to call her back through time. News traveled fast. The town heard before the official statement, because someone's cousin works at the lab, someone's friend knows a deputy, someone overhears a conversation at a diner. People stood in grocery store aisles with their hands over their mouths. They sat in trucks in parking lots and stared at nothing. The diner put up Maddie's photo again, fresh print this time, and under it they wrote in thick marker, "Found." Not "found alive." Not "home." Just "found," the bare minimum word that still carried the weight of years. The sheriff held another press conference, and this time he did say Dale Henson's name, because now the case had crossed a threshold from missing to homicide investigation, from hoping to hunting. He said Dale Henson was wanted in connection with the abduction and death of Madeline Rowe and potentially other missing persons cases. He asked the public for tips. He warned that Henson was dangerous. He begged for calm. And as he spoke, reporters' phones lit up with messages and speculation and the sick thrill of a case that had finally become big, finally become something the outside world cared about. The town didn't feel thrilled. It felt sick. Fame is not a gift when it's built on bones. The manhunt tightened. Rangers tracked the stolen ATV to a creek crossing where tire marks sank into mud and then climbed out on the other side, heading toward a cluster of abandoned oil field structures. A search team moved in and found the ATV ditched behind a rusted storage tank, keys still in it, as if the rider jumped off mid-motion. Nearby, in the shade of the tank, they found a backpack. Inside, a bottle of water, half empty, a box of ammunition, a cheap knife, a prepaid phone, and a bundle of photocopied clippings, Maddie's face again, and the new headline about her identification, printed from an internet cafe in a small town 2 counties away. Dale was still reading. Still consuming. Still controlling his own narrative even while running. And tucked in the side pocket of the backpack was a single small item that made Sosa's hands go cold when it was brought to her, a charm bracelet, rusted, with a tiny plastic star bead. Maddie's bracelet, or the ghost of it, carried and kept like a talisman. That was the moment the case stopped being a hunt for a suspect and became something more intimate and terrifying, a chase between the living and the dead, between a community that had waited for truth and a man who had apparently carried pieces of that truth with him like trophies for years. Dale Henson wasn't just escaping law enforcement. He was dragging the case behind him like a chain, refusing to let it end cleanly, refusing to let anyone else own the conclusion. On the 4th night, the helicopter's infrared finally caught a heat signature moving through brush near the edge of a ravine, too steady to be a deer, too purposeful to be coyotes. Rangers converged, lights off, boots silent, radios muted, because surprise was their only advantage now. They moved like shadows through mesquite, closing distance, and for a moment Sosa, listening from a command post, felt something like hope rise in her chest, a dangerous thing, sharp and bright. Then the radio crackled with a single, breathless line, visual. Subject running. Shots were not reported. Not yet. Just pursuit. Just heavy breathing over the radio. Just the sound of a man refusing to be caught one more time. And somewhere, in a dark kitchen miles away, Karen Rowe sat alone at her table, Maddie's photo propped in front of her, the phone beside her like a silent animal, and for the first time in years she didn't have to wonder if her daughter was alive, but she also didn't have the comfort of imagining rescue, and that shift, the sudden brutal certainty, felt like a different kind of kidnapping, one that stole the last fragile thread of hope she'd been using to stay upright, leaving her with only one. Hunger now, clean and merciless, to hear that Dale Henson was in custody, to know he couldn't move through the world anymore, to know he couldn't tap his fingers on counters and write block letter rules and decide when girls existed, and as the ravine swallowed the sound of footsteps and the night held its breath again, the whole county leaned into the same terrible question, whether the monster would finally be caught in the light, or whether he would choose the dark as his last act of control.